Several staff members started to move to arrange their tasks. Yoshimura Yuichi took out a phone from his pocket and called the beautiful country's CIA. "This is Yoshimura Yuichi. Please be ready to execute the sandwich cookie plan. My people are urging those warlords to mobilize. As long as there are no hitches on your side, don't exaggerate the achievements at Twin Peaks again." On the other line was Judith, the deputy director of the CIA, who was now fully in charge of the affairs related to JECA Group. Yoshimura Yuichi's face darkened, but he could not retort since he had indeed lost face at Twin Peaks, having boasted too soon. "Twin Peaks is different. We have now successfully circumvented this nail. JECA Group cannot stop our advance, and their doom is imminent." Yoshimura Yuichi was very confident. With hundreds of thousands of troops able to cross the Ruakai Mountains, this natural barrier, how could the almost destroyed military force of JECA Group withstand his massive army? Even super soldiers couldn't manage it. Heavy weapons could blast them into nothingness. Moreover, the sandwich cookie plan he had just mentioned meant that when he attacked G-State, the allied forces of the warlords from the northern border of Chan Country would also march south, attacking the core of JECA Group in East Chin State. This would put JECA Group in a pincer movement, giving them no chance to struggle or resist. Don't underestimate JECA Group. Be careful of their backup plans. Judith, hearing Yoshimura Yuichi's arrogant tone, warned him with unmistakable displeasure. He had dealt with JECA Group a lot and was very aware of their cunning and ruthlessness. Who knows how many CIA members had died at their hands? Any underestimation of their force would cost dearly. As for the super soldiers, I will be cautious. Our fighter jets, missiles, and tanks are all waiting for their do-or-die charge. Then, I will film it and let you appreciate their dying struggles," Yoshimura Yuichi said confidently, indicating that he could handle it. "General Yoshimura, please don't start celebrating with champagne before achieving final victory." Judith's voice on the phone was already laced with dissatisfaction, almost as if she was about to scold Yoshimura Yuichi outright. "I was merely stating facts. Director Judith, you are worrying too much. Wait for my good news." Yoshimura Yuichi did not want to listen to Judith, mainly because he also did not dare to lash out at her. "Once JECA Group is annihilated, I really must see the Sujie to find out if he really has 3 heads and 6 arms that frightened the deputy director of the CIA of beautiful country into a coward." Snorting in derision, Yoshimura Yuichi found Judith's timidity amusing. Meanwhile, far across the ocean, Judith put down the phone with a look of helplessness. Although he was the deputy director of the CIA of beautiful country in charge of intelligence, he wasn't actually responsible for waging wars. Moreover, he knew the 8-nation group no longer wanted to delay and was eager to resolve the JECA Group issue. Many influential people had been frightened by JECA Group's tactical ploys, fearing that their opponents might desperately lash out. Getting rid of JECA Group sooner would let them rest easy and enjoy the benefits after swallowing JECA Group. In the end, the 8-nation group also agreed to Yoshimura Yuichi's action plan. The 9th Mechanized Brigade, the 5th Armored Brigade, and the 8th Infantry Division set out first, paving their way along the Sidon River into Sin Fan Avenue. They traveled hundreds of kilometers, with a smooth arrival of 30,000 soldiers inside G-State's territory. This process was almost unobstructed, further convincing Yoshimura Yuichi that JECA Group's military force was significantly depleted. Otherwise, how could the 9th Mechanized Brigade, the 5th Armored Brigade, and the 8th Infantry Division have entered G-State so smoothly? Given the presence of numerous armored units and the advantage of having air superiority in the plains of G-State, the advantage was indeed immense. If he were JECA Group's commander, he would certainly have instructed his soldiers to act as guerrillas, entering the forest to disrupt this unit's advance. Because the complex environment of the Ruakai Mountains was suitable to limit this armor-centric troop, facing them on the plains would only be asking for trouble. It was precisely JECA Group's inactive response that allowed Yoshimura Yuichi to truly relax. He immediately sent the following army of 100,000 soldiers along the Sidon River, magnificently marching into the Ruakai Mountains, heading toward the territory of G-State. G-State, beneath Jiwei City, base number 5 underground. A train pulled into the station, and with a long whistle, the doors opened, and a batch of distinct soldiers disembarked. This group of soldiers was small, only over 100 strong. But accompanying these soldiers were logistics personnel numbering over 500. Underground base soldiers who were training and patrolling curiously looked on, only to see this batch of soldiers donned in light blue coats that looked similar to their Tianyuan protective clothing in style, yet the material seemed quite different. On these soldiers' shoulders, there perched chubby worms with 6 pairs of wings clinging to their bodies, seemingly in a deep slumber. What's more crucial was, these people carried an air of iciness, their gazes fierce. A mere look from them was enough to send a chill through many soldiers, making it feel as if they were encountering a natural predator. It's the Steel Camp. There's someone I've seen before. He is from the Steel Camp. Some soldier said this, and immediately, the atmosphere became very lively. In the military, strength was respected. Just as ordinary people idolize celebrities in Jekka Group, Steel Camp was the star every Jekka security soldiers idolized. Since its formation, this unit had always been Jekka Group's most mysterious and strongest core force, having carried out countless important missions, and with a completion rate of 100%, it was the world's strongest single soldier unit that countless soldiers adored and aspired to, far surpassing any other country's special forces. Looks like they have become fiercer than before. These are soldiers from the Steel Camp? It's my first time seeing them with my own eyes. If only I could join. I wonder what the requirements are to get into Steel Camp. More and more soldiers gathered, not much different from fans at a celebrity event. Everyone suit up. Miao Luan was accustomed to such scenes, as he used to be surrounded by people when visiting brother units for guidance. Under Miao Luan's order, logistics soldiers operated cranes to lift large iron boxes from the cargo section of the train, rapidly unfolding them on all sides. Click, click, click. Inside the open boxes were suites of biological armor, as batches of nutritional spirit liquid were pumped in, causing the flesh inside to writhe and merge together, while the exterior alloy metal received a forest camouflage paint, forming steel mechas standing 3 meters tall. One by one, Steel Camp soldiers stepped forward, fitting their bodies into the biological armors, whose rear parts grew close again, making them appear seamlessly integrated. The logistics soldiers brought various weapons, rocket launchers, anti-tank missiles, flamethrowers, Gatlins, anti-material sniper rifles, high-caliber anti-aircraft machines, along with a large amount of ammunition, fitting them into the biological armors, making them appear bulkier yet with the various weapons mounted. They looked even more imposing and intimidating. The nearby soldiers' mouths gradually formed an O shape, feeling their hearts wildly beating. The excitement and instinctive fear in their hearts made them feel as if they were mere plants facing a storm, ready to be torn apart at any moment. Get on the trucks. Without lingering, Miao Luan led his subordinates to board the trucks that had been waiting there. Base number 5 was closest to the front lines at the Ruakai Mountains, and they were to travel through an underground tunnel, eventually making their direct landing on the Ruakai Mountains. The heavy trucks carrying Steel Camp disappeared, but this was not the end. Over the next few days, Base number 5 became especially busy, with trains loaded with soldiers and supplies arriving here, and tens of thousands of soldiers heading to the front lines from this place. The war machine of Jekka Group had finally started to operate in earnest. Ruakai Mountains. The incessant drizzle resolutely fell, making the freshly constructed dirt road along the Seiden River as soft as a cake from several days of rainfall. Pop! Kuruyuki exerted all his strength to pull his left foot out of the thick mud. But he applied too much force, lost his balance, pitched forward, and fell face first into the mud, covering himself with it. Ha ha! Kuru, you idiot! If only I had my phone, I'd have captured this ridiculous look of yours. You must be really hungry. Kuru, wanting to even eat the mud. His comrades couldn't help but laugh at the sight. Tui tui tui. This cursed road, cursed forest, cursed country. Kuruyuki spat out the mud from his mouth with a crestfallen look and helplessly watched the team slowly trudging through the mud. They were the last unit to march out, belonging to the 7th Division of the Japan Self-Defense Force, numbering 8,000. They embarked during an unfortunate torrential downpour. A few days earlier, the first wave of troops, numbering over 100,000, had reportedly reached less than 60 miles from G-State. But their own rear unit was still stuck on the muddy roads of the Sidon River, wrestling knee and ankle deep in mud. As for the accompanying supply vehicles, they had long succumbed to the thick mud, the tires merely spinning in the muck, unable to move forward or even secure themselves. Now all they could do was tote their rucksacks, wear raincoats, carry a few days' worth of food and tents, and trudge on painstakingly by foot. Once we pass Scorpion Cloud Mountain, there is a supply station not too far ahead where we can rest and have some hot food. The voice of the platoon leader came through the radio, sparking excitement though their pace remained slow. 2 hours later, they finally reached Scorpion Cloud Mountain. The peaks of Scorpion Cloud Mountain were high, with a gorge at its base that could be traversed, looking from above like a scorpion's tail, hence the name. The 8,000 troops made a long line through the gorge. Soon, we'll have hot meals, hot dishes. I can't stand those cold rations anymore. Kuruyuki complained as he massaged his aching legs, now faintly seeing the supply station at the gorge's exit. This was built via helicopter transport, capable of providing hot meals. Due to the stranded supply vehicles, it had been 2 days since he last had a hot meal. Imagining delicious sushi, miso soup, tonkatsu ramen, beef dishes, and more, saliva unconsciously dribbled from his mouth. Wind. Perhaps from missing the food too much, he seemed to hallucinate, hearing a chilling voice. Where is that sound coming from? Who's speaking? I don't see a loudspeaker nearby. Weird. My communication device seems to be out of service. The long line of troops moving through the gorge turned their heads around in surprise. Kuruyuki then realized that it wasn't a hallucination. Someone actually was speaking, and the voice could be heard by thousands in the troop. Is this loud voice due to the echo from the gorge? Kuruyuki was mulling over it. Not sure if it was his own delusion, he felt the winds growing stronger. Rain! The voice spoke again. This time Kuruyuki could hear clearly. It seemed to come from the high parts of Scorpion Cloud Mountain. He grabbed the binoculars hanging around his neck and looked towards Scorpion Cloud Mountain. He faintly observed a prominent rock platform on the mountain peak, where a sacrificial table was set up, and a man stood there, but the rain impaired his visibility, making it difficult to see clearly. The rain intensified, big drops driven sideways by the fierce wind, stinging the face. It seemed like a celestial river linked the heavens, the rain merging into sheets, completely obscuring the man Kuruyuki had spotted through his binoculars just moments before. Mountain! The voice continued, a strange pressure and panic unsettling Kuruyuki. It was like the despair felt by a small animal facing a natural disaster, knowing it was impossible to fight back. Gurgle! Kuruyuki heard a loud noise. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly, mud splashing in ripples. A foul smell entered his nostrils. The water level in the ditches drastically reduced, and loose stones and debris fell from both sides of the gorge. It couldn't be, it couldn't be. Kuruyuki's face turned pale. Japan, being an island country situated on a seismic belt, was prone to frequent natural disasters, and at that moment he felt a premonition of impending disaster. Not just Kuruyuki, many among the thousands in the Japan Self-Defense Force were feeling the same panic and unrest. Above Scorpion Cloud Mountain, Sujie coldly watched the confused Japanese troops below, a cold smile hooking at the corner of his mouth. Your country has always been plagued by natural disasters. Such a customary hometown death suits you well. I am indeed too merciful. At that moment, Sujie had an array plate in front of him, his primordial spirit merging with the foundation of Scorpion Cloud Mountain. His primordial spirit, having grown multiple times, was now over 1 meter tall. Especially since the bond of the dual soul contract with Ghost Bride Han Ruyan gave Sujie's primordial spirit the power to summon a hint of heavenly might. At this moment, Sujie intended to unleash the pent-up heavenly might of Scorpion Cloud Mountain through his primordial spirit and array map. Collapse! Seeing the opportunity was ripe, Sujie cast a spell, triggered the formation, and stirred the inherent heavenly might of Scorpion Cloud Mountain itself. The next moment, The numerous soft soil and rocks beneath Sujie's feet began to slowly slide away. In the canyon, Kuruyuki's eyes widened, because he saw the slope of Scorpion Cloud Mountain, where trees and vegetation were moving rapidly, and the sound of thunderous rumbling reached his ears. The entire Scorpion Cloud Mountain, as if shedding its outer layer, countless rocks mixed with trees, cascaded down like great rivers from the heights. A catastrophic landslide, unprecedented in history, was rushing towards the canyon. Landslide, it's a landslide. Screams and cries of despair were incessant. All Japanese soldiers, both officers and enlisted men, had lost their composure. Facing the rolling torrent of the landslide, all their weapons were laughably toy-like in its presence. Unstoppable, unresistible, their only option was to flee, to escape the reach of the landslide. Kuruyuki, at the front of the group, stretched his legs and ran frantically with a fierce expression, trying to break out of this valley of death. Nearby, many soldiers like Kuruyuki discarded all semblance of decency and respect. Forget about camaraderie. Many were clawing and even shooting at those blocking the way ahead, desperate only to leave the canyon doomed to be submerged. I can live, I must live. Kuruyuki, seeing the exit was near, excitement of surviving the ordeal flashed across his face. But his smile hadn't lasted a second when his head struck something as solid as steel, causing his head to burst open and bleed. Many Japanese soldiers experienced the same thing. Inexplicably, a translucent barrier had appeared in what seemed like empty air, stopping them as if they had hit an iron wall. What is this? Why can't we get out? We've hit a ghost. Fire at it. Break it quickly. A large number of soldiers began shooting and firing rocket launchers, and after a barrage of rocket fire, the barrier held for half a minute before shattering. But time was no longer on their side, as the landslide rolling down from Scorpion Cloud Mountain would not give them another chance. The moment these Japanese soldiers broke through the barrier, the cascading landslide roared into the canyon and spread in all directions. Trapped within the narrow canyon, countless Japanese soldiers could only watch in despair as the natural disaster struck, their bodies crushed and buried by the relentless rocks and soil.
No.
Please no. Kuruyuki sat paralyzed on the ground, watching the tsunami of soil and rocks roaring towards him, his body trembling uncontrollably. But nature would not heed human pleas, mercilessly swallowing his body, burying him under millions of tons of earth and stone. Under the interference of the secret realm by Sujie, the landslide of Scorpion Cloud Mountain intensified, not only completely flooding the canyon. The overflowing landslide rolled down both sides, engulfing both the supply station and the Japanese soldiers outside who hadn't yet entered the canyon, leaving no chance to escape. All around Scorpion Cloud Mountain was covered with rolling earth and stone, as though a child had poured cement into an anthill, completely submerging and solidifying it. Facing Mother Nature's heavenly might, the 7th Division of Japan was no different from ants. 8,000 Japanese soldiers became sacrificial offerings to this landslide disaster. Quietly observing all this, Sujie shook his head with emotion. Nature is heartless, people have feelings. Well, I can't bear to see you become wandering ghosts. Better to settle down in my 10,000 soul banner. At his feet, a 10,000 soul banner fluttered in the wind, absorbing a myriad of human souls. Even in death, their souls manipulated by Sujie. If these Japanese soldiers knew this beneath the earth, they would certainly wish to tear him limb from limb. Of course, with their souls enslaved, they naturally could not be aware even in death, since they had been refined into souls for the 10,000 soul banner. The true might of heavenly might is terrifying to such an extent. Sujie admired his own handiwork, knowing that only those in the Taoist platform realm could begin to harness the power of heavenly might, and even then not extensively. Sujie's current primordial spirit could only manage some small-scale rainmaking, creating minor earthquakes, or stirring up a low-intensity tornado storm with a very limited area of effect. The massive mudslide that occurred on Scorpion Cloud Mountain this time was because the Ruakai Mountains had been experiencing days of heavy rain, making the soil and rocks of Scorpion Cloud Mountain soft and vulnerable, and a major mudslide was imminent anyway. Su Jie merely used the array map and his primordial spirit to go with the flow, controlling the timing of the mudslide's occurrence and maximizing its destructive power, using nature's force to wipe out 8,000 men of Japan's 7th Division. When the mudslide slowed down as it reached the plains, gradually losing its kinetic energy and stopping, Su Jie put away the 10,000 soul banner and several array maps, satisfied. Although it cost quite a few spirit stones, the result is good. Who says that to block the retreat of an army of over 100,000, one must act at Twin Peaks? Nature will help me do just that. The terrain near Scorpion Cloud Mountain was completely transformed. The painstakingly constructed roads by the engineers were destroyed, and an overwhelming mass of earth and rocks collapsed, completely blocking the strategic passageway and sealing off the retreat of the Chan country and Japanese armies, numbering over 100,000, into the Ruakai Mountains. Next, it's time to trap and eliminate them properly. Su Jie's eyes were sharp as ice. He left a soft laugh behind and turned to leave the area. What did you say? The entire 7th Division has been annihilated? In the Japanese command center, Yoshimura Yuichi stared blankly at the frontline report, his head buzzing. The staff officer beside him wore a complex expression, with indescribable sorrow and grief, and said solemnly, "The news has been confirmed. Our 7th Division encountered a massive mudslide on Scorpion Cloud Mountain. This is a photo taken by the satellites. Search and rescue helicopters and aid teams have already rushed there, but no survivors have been found yet. Damn it! How could we be so unlucky to encounter a natural disaster like this?" Yoshimura Yuichi could hardly contain his rage, feeling as if bad luck had been following him ever since he came to Chan country, hardly encountering a single good thing. The news has already begun to spread to the outside world. The Prime Minister might demand accountability. What does that have to do with me? I can't predict such natural disasters, replied Yoshimura Yuichi, but he knew very well that regardless of the reasons, he, as the overall commander, couldn't escape responsibility. General, there's another issue. The landslide on Scorpion Cloud Mountain was very severe, causing the road we constructed by the Seiden River to be temporarily cut off. Should we consider having the troops in the Ruakai Mountains hold their position or retreat first, waiting to reopen the transportation before advancing? Suggested the staff officer. The logistical needs of an army of over 100,000 are immense. Without restoring the supply lines, the large army could be in grave danger. Hearing the staff officer's suggestion, Yoshimura Yuichi refused without a second thought. No, this is a race against time. Our troops are about to reach G-State, and the supplies carried by the army are sufficient for 10 to 15 days of warfare. Furthermore, the Jekka group hardly has any resistance left. As long as we can urgently repair the roads within half a month, everything will not be an issue, said Yoshimura Yuichi firmly. What a joke. He was already on shaky ground due to the setbacks at Twin Peaks, and his position was at risk. The losses caused by the mudslide at Scorpion Cloud Mountain might be something he considered unrelated to himself, but that might not be the internal consensus within his own country. For him not to be relieved of his post, he needed to quickly achieve results to wash away the stains on his reputation, to show his strength to the homeland. In such a situation, only the advancement of the ground forces into G-State and seizing territory could accomplish this. On the other hand, if the army stayed idle, his dismissal would be all but guaranteed. The Prime Minister may not understand military strategy, but would certainly know how to deal with an inefficient officer who shied away from battle and showed fear. Issue my order. The troops will continue to advance, passing through the Ruakai Mountains as quickly as possible. While I mobilize all available forces, contact the Chan country government, and urgently clear the congestion on Scorpion Cloud Mountain to restore traffic. Speed is essential in warfare. We must take advantage of the Jekka group's heavy losses and their incapability to mobilize troops on a large scale to annihilate them outright, commanded Yoshimura Yuichi, believing that in the face of risk, there's a chance for great rewards. In his view, the Jekka group no longer had much combat power, and he wouldn't scare himself over an accidental natural disaster, thus giving the Jekka group a chance to catch their breath. Sinfan Avenue, an army was marching. Tanks and armored vehicles rumbled over the broken road, flanked by a large number of soldiers on foot, followed by many heavy trucks loaded with logistic supplies. Sin Fan Avenue was just a simple paved dirt road that became increasingly battered under the crush of these steel behemoths, especially with the relentless downpour. Even though most of their armor primarily used tracks, passing through the muddy road was exceedingly difficult, with astonishingly high breakdown rates, and a non-negligible number got stuck. This troop belonged to a mixed force of Chan country and Japan, with a total strength of over 15,000, including an armored regiment, a mechanized brigade, an artillery regiment, and 2 infantry regiments. They were the closest to G-State among the hundreds of thousands of troops marching through the Ruakai Mountains. At this moment, there was only 80 kilometers left to G-State. Aboard a command vehicle, Isaka Yusuk sat with a map spread out in front of him. The map showed the marching routes for G-State and the Ruakai Mountains, along with the topography of the area. Tell the troops to speed up, strive to get out of the Ruakai Mountains by tomorrow afternoon, and reach the territory of G-State, he said. Isaka Yusuk looked out at the pouring rain, and the message from the rear command post about Scorpion Cloud Mountain's collapse causing traffic disruption filled him with a sense of unease. Modern warfare's consumption of ammunition was enormous. Not to mention those steel beasts in his own force, the daily fuel consumption alone reached astronomical figures, necessitating comprehensive logistical support. Pushing open the door of the command vehicle, Isaka Yusuk stepped out. He watched as yet another tank got stuck in a mud pit, while logistics personnel and engineers were struggling to lay down broken stones and timbers below it, trying to provide the treads some traction on the slippery mud. 200 meters away, a heavy truck lay overturned, its load of canned food strewn all over the ground. Further ahead, engineers were reinforcing and repairing a bridge because the heavy rain had caused the river to swell and the currents to become too treacherous to cross without reinforcement. Situations like these occurred now and then. Although the initial part of the march went smoothly, the latter half had become a torture as the incessant rain caused the entire expedition to struggle, sometimes with the armored units making less progress in a day than the infantry could. The tropical rainforest of Chan country in the Ruakai Mountains, combined with torrential rain and non-existent infrastructure, was any armored unit's nightmare. A mere few dozen kilometers which a normal armored unit could cross in a matter of 2 to 3 hours. However, within the Ruakai Mountains, this became a test of both the physical strength and mental will of the soldiers, requiring a whole day to get through. Add to that the humid and sweltering air in the forest after the downpour, and not only were the local Chan country soldiers worn to exhaustion, but so were the Japanese soldiers who were experiencing this ordeal for the first time, leaving the entire troop bereft of spirit. The meteorology department says the thunderstorms will continue for the next week. A staff officer reported to Isaka Yusuk, holding an umbrella for him. This damned weather. Luckily, we only have the last 80 kilometers left. We're about to escape this mire of hell, but it's tough on the brother units behind us. Isaka Yusuk shook his head. When war broke out, you couldn't choose the weather. You couldn't simply opt out of fighting because of bad weather, and the rear command post hadn't given them the order to stop and rest where they were. Tell the brothers to put in extra effort. Once we're through the Ruakai Mountains, we'll finally be able to relax, he said. Aye. While this mixed force of Japan and Chan country endured a difficult march along Sin Fan Avenue, they were unaware that a formidable opponent had already set their sights on them. Within the lush, primeval jungle on both sides of Sin Fan Avenue, steel camp genetic soldiers wearing biological armor were scattered and laying in ambush. The rain pattered against the biological armor without quenching their ardent, warlike hearts. A desire for combat surged within them. Miao Luan picked up the walkie-talkie and said indifferently, "Artillery unit, confirm the enemy's position again and decide for yourselves when to open fire." SCZ. Captain, no problem. Captain, the enemy have entered our ambush position, ready to open fire whenever. A few seconds later, some distorted and noisy sounds came through the walkie-talkie. The dense vegetation of the jungle greatly reduced the range of sensors and communication equipment. On top of that, due to the storm, the thick, wet foliage severely weakened the radio signals. In the rainforest, at certain locations, Miao Luan's artillery unit was not the traditional kind of artillery. They were all steel camp soldiers, each carrying a specially made 120mm caliber heavy mortar on their back in addition to conventional weapons. Typically, such a heavy mortar, weighing about 200 kilograms, would require several strong soldiers to carry it and generally took a team of 4 or 5 to operate. For long-distance movement, they would be mounted on wheels, with jeeps or armored personnel carriers usually towing them for mobility. But these genetic soldiers' mortars were different, perfectly mounted on the back of the soldiers, as if integrated with their biological armor. Wu Wo was the commander of this artillery unit, in charge of more than 20 gunners. The entire steel camp numbered over 120 personnel. Typically, 3 soldiers formed a combat squad, 3 squads and a squad leader made up a platoon, 3 platoons made up a company, and the steel camp consisted of 4 such companies. Genetic soldiers, depending on which insect genes they had fused with, varied in how they used their weapons. It seemed like the artillery unit commanded by Wu Wo from Steel Camp was the best at firing guns. Other genetic warriors were not incapable of shooting, it was mainly that they did not have the same accuracy. Besides firing guns, they were equally adept at wielding various weapons in medium to close combat. Almost every genetic warrior was versatile. Over 20 artillerymen had already released their eye worms, utilizing a flight radius of 3.5 kilometers and an altitude of 1,000 meters. They could observe targets within 15 kilometers. One by one, the eye worms flew into the sky, the palm-sized creatures hardly noticeable as they shared visual data directly with the genetic warriors' minds, calculating various distances, altitudes, and numbers. It was like a personal information terminal, with no potential for the loss or distortion of intelligence during transmission. 1.5 minutes of covering fire. Seeing the opportunity with the enemy all within the ambush zone, Wu Wo decisively gave the order. The scattered artillerymen of Steel Camp received the firing information from their radios and began crouching down. Click! Wu Wo himself also squatted down, slightly lowering his head, a 120mm mortar barrel protruding from his neck while ammunition boxes were piled in front of him. Usually, deploying a traditional heavy mortar required building a launch position, setting up the mortar and manual targeting, which took about half an hour. But Wu Wo had skipped all these steps, his body serving as both the mounting and the base. He grabbed a mortar round with one hand and directly shoved it into the barrel behind him. The 18-kilogram shell slid down the barrel under gravity, colliding with the firing pin, triggering the primer. The air was blasted upward from the barrel, the recoil transferring to his body. Wu Wo quaked from the force. Under such conditions, a normal person's internal organs and bones would have shattered, but protected by biological armor and his modified physique, he endured the impact and vibrations. In milliseconds, the high-velocity rounds with a maximum range of 8 kilometers swiftly exited the barrel, curving as they fell toward the enemy on Sin Fan Avenue. Boom! The shell exploded off the side of the road, sending a horrific shock wave and shrapnel flying, shredding bodies within several meters and leaving behind a huge crater. The nearby soldiers from Japan and Chan country collapsed in masses. Many of those further away were pierced through by shrapnel, clutching their wounds and screaming in agony. Even those who were lucky enough not to get injured felt their blood churn and organs ache from the massive explosion. This 120mm heavy mortar packed enormous power, deadly within a radius of 25 meters, and likely to cause injuries within 50 meters. Even standing over 100 meters away was no guarantee of safety. Who is firing the guns? Isaka Yusuk, startled by the explosion, stayed clear-headed and issued combat commands through his command vehicle. We're facing an ambush. Infantry must immediately find cover, anti-artillery radar to track enemy movements, deploy reconnaissance drones, contact land and air forces, report to headquarters. But Isaka Yusuk had underestimated the intensity of the attack. His orders had just been relayed when a torrent of shells continually hammered down, causing chaos in the advancing troops. Feels great. I'm gonna blast these motherfuckers hard. Wu Wo's face was lit with excitement, his hands alternating swiftly. The moment his left hand loaded a mortar round into the barrel and fired it off, while smoke still lingered at the muzzle, his right hand had already smoothly loaded another shell into the barrel, with no unnecessary or spare motions in between. One could only see Wu Wa's hands moving so fast they seemed to blur, firing the 120mm mortar at an incredible rate. In just 1 minute, no less than 30 shells had been fired, creating a continuous series of blasts without pause. For comparison, a 120mm vehicle-mounted mortar with an advanced fire control and automatic ammunition loading system only had a firing rate of about 10 rounds per minute. As for traditional heavy mortars operated manually, their sustained firing rate was even slower, generally only 6 or 7 rounds per minute. The reason being that humans have limited physical strength, and their actions aren't as fast, precise, or consistent as a machine's. However, in front of the genetic warriors of Steel Camp, they managed to fire at a terrifying rate far surpassing that of vehicle-mounted heavy mortars. 30 rounds per minute, a rate typical of 60mm light mortars, was exhibited instead on 120mm heavy mortars, skillfully manipulated by the genetic warriors. Leveraging their extraordinary strength, speed, and reflexes, Wu Wa's movements were not only fast but also stable. Each recoil had already caused him to leave 2 deep indentations in the ground, and with each shell fired, his body shook. Yet, he could perfectly adapt, subtly adjusting his body after each bombardment to ensure the mortar's aim remained steady. He also continuously monitored the effects of the bombardments through the airborne eye worms. When the enemy began to retreat and seek cover, he would readjust the mortar's aim effortlessly with slight movements of his body, completing the realignment in less than a second. For other traditional mortars, soldiers needed to calculate the firing elements themselves, using a triangular mount turntable and elevation mechanism to adjust the mortar tube's angle, a complicated and time-consuming process that could delay combat opportunities. But Wu Wa could do it effortlessly with a single bodily adjustment. Like Wu Wa, over 20 genetic warriors serving as artillerymen each had an average firing rate exceeding 30 rounds per minute. The group of over 20, their mortar barrels roaring incessantly like furious beasts, fired 600 to 700 shells down on Sin Fan Avenue in 1 minute. This terrifying volume of fire, especially from large 120mm caliber shells, caused extremely horrifying casualties. Under the covering fire, Sin Fan Avenue was now filled with cries of agony. Boom! A shell landed in a densely crowded area, blasting a 2-meter-deep crater and scattering the body parts of over a dozen soldiers who perished instantly, leaving no survivors. Various limbs and organs mixed with the flying, scorched earth, coloring the ground a dark red. An armored vehicle driving in was hit by the mortar, which had a relatively low muzzle velocity and subsonic shell speed, resulting in poor armor penetration capability. But this was a direct hit with a heavy 120mm shell. The shell struck directly from above, rendering the armored vehicle totally wrecked, and none of the crew inside survived. They all died instantly. A tank was also hit on the roof. Although the shell did not penetrate the armor, it destroyed the external equipment of the tank, causing onboard systems to fail, and all the crew inside were stunned. Several mortar shells followed, one of which fortuitously hit the engine compartment at the back of the turret, causing the engine to catch fire. The crew inside, stunned from the impact, couldn't respond and perished confusedly in the burning tank. Rumble. An ammunition transport vehicle got stuck in a mud pit, becoming a target for the artillery. When hit by a mortar shell, accompanied by a massive fireball, soldiers in the vicinity were caught in the explosion and died in the subsequent massive ammunition detonation. In just 1.5 minutes of sustained bombardment, thousands of shells fell, turning Sin Fan Avenue into a meat grinder. Countless soldiers trembled in the explosive roars, their bodies torn apart while the ground was stained red with blood and organ fragments. Suffering severe casualties due to the focus on densely packed infantrymen, at least several thousand lay dead in pools of blood. Although the mortar shells they had brought were considerably depleted, the results were undoubtedly very satisfying. After 1.5 minutes of intense covering fire, Wu Wa immediately ordered, "Everyone conduct mobile artillery strikes. Don't get blown up." Having said that, Wu Wa picked up the ammunition box at his feet and swiftly changed positions. The enemy's counterattack was imminent, as observed through the eye worms. Scarcely 10 seconds after he left, a self-propelled howitzer fired in retaliation. A 50-kilogram shell fell near his former position. Had he been there, he would have been blasted along with his biological armor. Wu had run several hundred meters away, so this shell no longer posed a threat to him. Ordinary mortars, even vehicle-mounted ones, simply couldn't shift positions like this. In a forest environment, speeds weren't feasible. Only genetic warriors could carry hundreds of kilograms of mortars and ammunition and still move swiftly. The action paused as Wu locked onto the coordinates of the self-propelled howitzer using the eyeworm. After confirming it was within range, he crouched down, opened the ammunition box and stuffed shells into the barrel. Bang! Bang! Bang! 3 shells fired off rapidly, and Wu picked up the ammunition box and ran again. Because the enemy's counter-artillery radar had locked onto his firing position again, other artillery shells came hurling towards him. Not just from self-propelled howitzers but also rocket artillery and even missiles were flying in. There was no choice but to run. 3 mortar shells fell, and that self-propelled howitzer was also on the move. This self-propelled howitzer was lucky. The mortars did not hit it, but because it was moving erratically, its front wheel got stuck in a mud pit, and it ground to a halt. Trying to outgun me? Seeing this, Wu couldn't help but laugh and decisively crouched down again to fire. This time the 3 rapid shots were successful. 1 mortar shell hit the target, directly destroying the self-propelled howitzer. This thing wasn't a tank. It couldn't defend against the 120mm mortar bombardment. The 20-plus artillerymen continued to wield their influence, pushing their mobility advantage to the limit. Stop and shoot and run, and the dense forest environment allowed them to move like elusive assassins, completely confounding the Japanese and Chan country soldiers. The 20-plus artillerymen lacked the previous fierce rapid fire, yet Japan was utterly unable to cope, because their counterattacks simply could not hit the agile steel camp artillerymen. Instead, their armor and artillery appeared clumsy in the forest, sinking deep into the mud and struggling to move. Armored vehicles and tanks were unable to push through the primeval forest but buzzed around aimlessly like headless flies, unsure of what to do. Rocket artillery, self-propelled howitzers, towed artillery, close-range missile launchers, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, armored vehicles, and tanks were all targeted by Steel Camp's artillerymen. At this moment, these armored and firepower units could only crowd together on Sin Fan Avenue as the Steel Camp artillerymen deliberately left the dirt road pitted and uneven, making it even harder for these heavy steel beasts to maneuver. Unit after unit, weighing tens of tons, could only passively receive hits, unable to lock onto the hit-and-run Steel Camp artillerymen. Once they had fired all the shells they carried, Steel Camp artillerymen quickly located ammunition depots nearby that they had previously stocked, resupplying and continuing their bombardment. Others might conduct guerrilla warfare with rifles, but here at Steel Camp, guerrilla warfare was carried out with 120mm heavy mortars, and the effect was remarkably significant. The slow-reacting armor units and artillery were left dazed and confused by the mortar blasts. They couldn't understand how the enemy's artillerymen could move so fast in the dense forest and why they couldn't destroy them. However, high-altitude satellites couldn't clearly see the ground in the forest. They were blocked by the lush branches and leaves of the towering trees. Low-flying drones had just taken off, attempting to guide their artillery fire when they were disrupted by signal jammers. Moreover, the severe signal attenuation inherent to forests was not conducive for drones, which fell one by one shortly after taking off. This also led to the Chan country and Japanese soldiers still not having discovered the true appearance of their adversaries. It can be said that with just over 20 cannons, the Steel Camp's artillerymen had nearly caused the collapse of the combined Japanese and Chan country army of tens of thousands. A large number of infantry were killed or wounded, and their firepower units were destroyed one after another, with the battle almost entirely one-sided. However, modern warfare is three-dimensional, encompassing not only the ground but also the participation of air combat aircraft, especially the side controlling the skies. Steel Camp's artillerymen were bombing vigorously, having nearly wiped out the armored and firepower units of this army of over 10,000, inflicting casualties on 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers. But at that moment, fighter jets and helicopters soared overhead. These were planes on their routine armed patrol. Upon receiving the news, they quickly came to support. Although a downpour was unleashing its fury, modern military aircraft could generally operate all weather, whether at night or during a thunderstorm, without affecting their operational readiness. Wu didn't continue his brash actions. The jets roared overhead at high speeds, and even a sweep of their machine guns could penetrate the biological armor, causing them to temper their boldness. Our fighters, our jets have arrived. Salvation at last. Bring down the enemy artillery to avenge our fallen comrades. Counterattack, warriors of Japan. Follow me and seek out the enemy's artillery. On Sin Fan Avenue, the morale of the previously near-collapsing Japanese troops skyrocketed instantly, and they howled with fervor. Miao Luan, watching the combat aircraft above Skydome, picked up the radio and said, "Prepare the air defense missiles. Drive them away." On several hilltops, disguised vehicle-mounted radars powered up, and the radars began to sweep and lock onto the combat aircraft. Accompanying the radar vehicles, air defense missile vehicles erected themselves, and 6 to 7 meter long air defense missiles ignited at the tail and soared into the sky. The infrared imaging tracking system activated, locking onto the heat of the aircraft's exhaust, rapidly closing the distance to the planes. These air defense missiles, purchased from Mao Bear country, had not been used for urban defense because they were hard to sustain against the deep pockets of the Eight-Nation Group. They were reserved for use in decisive battles like this one. For example, deployed here were 2 air defense missile battalions, not to mention the guidance radar vehicles and low-altitude search radar vehicles, but also as many as 24 air defense missile launch vehicles. Missile incoming. The fighter pilots who came to support turned pale. Used to dominating the skies over the Jekka Group, and almost forgetting the threat of air defense missiles, they were now rudely reminded by the Jekka Group. Flares were continuously ejected, as jets began evasive maneuvers in a desperate attempt to dodge air defense missiles. Some were successful, either by deceiving the missiles with flares or by skillfully maneuvering away from them. But there were just as many failures. Once locked on by the Jekka Group's air defense missiles, they would accelerate and reach speeds several times that of sound, far exceeding that of the fighter jets, and head straight for them. They didn't need to make physical contact. As they came within a certain range, sensing the fighter, the radio proximity fuse would trigger, causing the missile to detonate in midair, sending shockwaves and shrapnel flying with the blast designed to take out fighter jets. A jet, just within a few dozen meters radius, would be within its lethal range. Modern fighter jets were precision machines, packed with delicate instruments. Even minor damage could render them uncontrollable, or even cause them to lose balance and crash. Some fighters had half a wing blown off by an air defense missile, tumbling through the air like birds with broken wings. Other pilots were pierced by shrapnel from the missiles, dying in their cockpits, their uncontrolled planes crashing into the earth, bursting into immense fireballs. While attacking the fighter jets, the missile launchers and radar vehicles were similarly under attack. Some launchers were destroyed. Fortunately, the number of air defense missile units far exceeded the number of fighters, constantly threatening the jets in the Skydome. After losing 5 or 6 jets, the remaining few had no choice but to flee the battle zone. Buzzing. In addition to the fighters, there were also helicopters from the aviation units coming to provide support. While the fighters were engaged in battle, Miao Luan, using his eye worms, locked onto an armed helicopter and moved swiftly through the forest on foot. He lay in ambush ahead of the incoming helicopter and raised a 14.5 mm anti-aircraft machine gun. Bang! Bang! Bang! Bang! Bang! As the armed helicopter approached, Miao Luan decisively pulled the trigger, his gun hitting the chopper repeatedly. Though armed helicopters were armored, Miao Luan's incredible reflexes and strength as a genetic warrior made for a steady aim. Armor-piercing incendiary bullets with pointed tips, boat tails, and steel cores, filled with incendiary material, bit into the helicopter, bashing its tail rotor, the helicopter's most vulnerable part, to shreds. BW-78 is unstable. We need to make an emergency landing. The 2 pilots in the armed helicopter, sweating profusely, cried out to alert their comrades. With the tail rotor's destruction, the helicopter's sideways thrust vanished, unbalancing the craft, causing the body to vibrate intensely and the nose to veer automatically, inducing a rolling motion. If this were an open plane, the helicopter might have had a slim chance of a successful emergency landing. But in the dense jungle, the helicopter struck a tree during its descent, twisting and breaking up into pieces, wrecking it into scrap metal, leaving no chance for the pilots to survive. Miao Luan wasn't the only one hunting helicopters. Another genetic warrior climbed a sturdy tree and, as a helicopter flew nearby, he shouldered a 105mm caliber rocket launcher and fired, hitting the helicopter's belly and sending it plummeting to the ground in a trail of black smoke. Still another genetic warrior launched a single-soldier anti-tank missile from his shoulder, blasting a hovering armed helicopter out of the sky. The genetic warriors were in their element in the forest. The helicopter's sighting equipment struggled to lock onto them through the dense tree canopies, and their thermal imaging sensors were blocked by the Tianyuan protective clothing. On the other hand, their bulky targets and loud noise made them sitting ducks, not to mention the genetic warriors had eye worms for reconnaissance support. After more than a dozen helicopters crashed like the fighter jets before them, they beat a hasty retreat, dampening the spirits of the Japan soldiers that had just begun to rise, driving them deeper into despair. With the departure of air support, the steel camp artillery resumed its assault. The dull roar of the cannons filled the air as the earth was blasted apart and bodies were torn to shreds. Retreat, everyone, into the forest. The armored units will attempt to break out and carve us a path of escape. Isaka Yusuk, seeing the situation, could only order all troops to retreat into the forest rather than remain on Sin Fan Avenue to be bombarded. The prey has entered the forest, Miao Luan, spotting this through the eye worms, let a bloodthirsty smile cross his lips after a long absence. Artillery units keep bombarding, coordinate with the 4th platoon to handle the armored units. The rest, follow me to hunt the prey, finish off these fellows before the enemy's next air support arrives, Miao Luan said. Shadows flickered in the forest as steel camp soldiers began to move from all directions toward the Japan soldiers who sought shelter from the shelling. Miao Luan stepped forth, his biological armors broad, duck-like webbed feet providing powerful traction. Inheriting the strength of the long-speared demon beetle and the speed of the wind feather-jumping worm, Miao Luan leaped over 10 meters at a time through the mud, barely hindered. Locking onto the position of an infantry battalion through eye worms, Miao Luan approached rapidly, the anti-aircraft gun in his right hand ready. The dense foliage and bushes concealed him well, and Miao Luan trod lightly. Until he was within 50 meters, nobody noticed his approach. What is that? A Japanese soldier looked on in terror as he came face to face with a 3-meter-tall metallic mecha, its surface painted with camouflage. Bang! The next moment, the Japanese soldier's body was cut in half by machine gun fire. Scum of Japan, long time no see, Miao Luan said, his eyes brimming with murderous intent as he stared at the startled infantry camp. There was not a trace of fear on his face as he charged in. Bang, bang, bang. The 14.5mm bullets that could penetrate armored vehicles ripped through human bodies, dismembering limbs, blowing up heads, breaking arms and legs, and shattering chests. This time, Miao Luan unleashed himself, letting the bullets fly almost non-stop. The 2,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition carried by his biological armor meant he no longer had to conserve ammo like before, limiting his firepower. With a muzzle energy of 30,000 joules and weighing 200 grams, the 14.5mm machine gun bullets, combined with Miao Luan's increasingly powerful physique, especially the sensory enhancement from the purple light bat, made almost every shot hit its target. He had just made his appearance when dozens of Japanese soldiers, caught off guard, were instantly killed by Miao Luan. What the hell is this thing? Damn it! Shoot! Shoot! Shoot! By the time the Japanese soldiers reacted, countless bullets were sprayed at him. Even though Miao Luan could run at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, he couldn't dodge the barrage of bullets. Not that Miao Luan was planning to dodge, for the rifle bullets that hit his biological armor were simply deflected. Are you trying to tickle me? Miao Luan kept returning fire with his anti-aircraft machine gun, and it didn't take long for the Japanese soldiers to realize what kind of opponent they were facing. They had heard of the notorious reputation of the steel camp and had undergone special training and preparations for this. Shit, the bullets can't penetrate. It's those freaks from Steel Camp. Bring out the heavy weapons. In the roar of a Japanese officer, a Barrett anti-material sniper rifle was set up, while a 12.7mm Browning heavy machine gun with a bullet chain aimed at Miao Luan. Rocket launchers, recoilless rifles, anti-tank rifles, and anti-tank missiles were among the weaponry capable of penetrating armor. All were taken up by the infantry to deal with Miao Luan. Bang! An armor-piercing incendiary bullet fired from a Barrett sniper rifle hit Miao Luan in the chest, and the bullet, capable of penetrating over 20 millimeters of steel plate, failed to completely penetrate the biological armor. After piercing the outer layer of alloy metal scale armor, the bullet was firmly trapped inside by the layer of flesh of the biological armor. This layer of flesh had properties like high-strength special rubber. When the bullet hit, it was like hitting the solid bulletproof wheels of an armored vehicle, unable to penetrate through. Bang, bang, bang. The 12.7mm caliber Browning heavy machine gun fired, its dense rain of bullets striking the biological armor, which also withstood the onslaught. It wasn't until an armor-piercing bullet from a 14.5mm anti-tank rifle pierced the biological armor that it was truly penetrated, but even then, it was blocked by the exoskeleton secreted by Miao Luan's body. The long spear demon beetle genes he inherited were not inferior to the biological armor in terms of defense. The 14.5mm bullets still couldn't penetrate through 2 layers of protection. How is this possible? Why can't we penetrate his armor? Why is his battle armor so defensively strong? Witnessing all this, the Japanese soldiers were dumbfounded. The special training they had undergone based on intelligence suggested that the alloy battle armor worn by the Steel Camp couldn't possibly withstand 12.7mm bullets. These Japanese soldiers didn't know that the Steel Camp had long since undergone an upgrade. The alloy battle armor that could defend against regular rifle bullets had been retired and replaced with biological armor that could withstand the barrage of 12.7mm machine guns. Such powerful equipment greatly enhanced the survivability of the Steel Camp on the battlefield, and it was also the confidence that allowed them to dare to take on a modernized army of more than 10,000 with only 100 men. With a rocket launcher and anti-tank missiles, no way we can't break through him. A Japanese officer refused to believe in defeat and called for his soldiers to prepare more heavy firepower. However, Miao Luan was no wooden doll. How could he possibly stand still and let himself be targeted? Go to hell, monster! Just as a Japanese soldier shouldered a rocket launcher and aimed at Miao Luan, before he could pull the trigger, a bullet from Miao Luan hit him first, blowing his head apart. Hundreds of meters away, another Japanese soldier fired an anti-tank missile, a type specifically designed for tanks and helicopters, with a warhead typically using a shaped charge for maximum armor penetration of about 1,400 millimeters. It could easily penetrate tank armor, which was not something Miao Luan's defense and biological armor could withstand. But the anti-tank missile was slow to fly, and after its launch, the shooter had to continuously aim at the target with a laser to make the missile track its target, unlike an air defense missile which requires less guidance once fired. Just as the anti-tank missile operator was controlling the missile toward Miao Luan by observing the bright red light at its tail, Miao Luan's bullet had already smashed the shooter and his laser, and the incoming anti-tank missile, losing its guided aim, crashed into the ground, killing 2 of its own soldiers. More armor-piercing weapons took aim. This battalion-level unit had more than 300 people. After conventional firearms proved ineffective against Miao Luan, they relied on rocket launchers, recoilless rifles, and anti-tank missiles to threaten him. Miao Luan was no fool. Seeing the response of the Japanese soldiers, he changed his pace and quickly disappeared into the dense forest. The Japanese soldiers holding various armor-piercing weapons looked around bewilderedly, no longer seeing Miao Luan. Try sending out drones, contact the reconnaissance satellites. Some soldiers dispatched quadcopter drones, but the area was still within the range of signal interference, so the reconnaissance attempt failed. As for the reconnaissance satellites, they were incapable of penetrating the primal forest to locate a human who wanted to hide his tracks. The greatest value of the jungle in war is to provide unmatched concealment. And modern technology emphasizes first detection, then first strike. Right now, in the vast Ruakai Mountains, these Japanese soldiers, armed though they were, became as blind as bats before Miao Luan. At that moment, using both hands and feet, Miao Luan climbed a large tree that required several people to wrap their arms around, where a 14.5mm anti-aircraft machine gun was mounted. He was 300 meters away from the Japanese infantry battalion, a distance that would still be within the range of small arms on a plane. But in the forest, it was impossible to see people. Looking around, all one could see were dim tree branches and foliage, intertwining vines like layers of nets, through which even sunlight struggled to penetrate. The eye worm released by Miao Luan, with its 6 pairs of wings as thin as cicada wings, gently fluttered, surveying the situation for several kilometers around and monitoring those still on Sin Fan Avenue. The remaining rocket artillery and mortar, if called by the infantry for a strike, could threaten Miao Luan. But to call a strike, first they had to know Miao Luan's location. Miao Luan lay down, his heavy anti-aircraft gun aimed forward. Although he couldn't see anyone, his genes fused with those of the purple light that allowed him to pinpoint the enemy's position without using his eyes. Gurgle, gurgle. Inaudible ultrasonic waves emanated from his throat, spreading like ripples. Every object the ultrasonics collided with sent feedback to Miao Luan's mind, acting like a biological detection radar, replacing the need for eyes. Bang, bang, bang. As he pulled the trigger, a burst of shots sent several 14.5 by 114mm machine gun rounds flying from the barrel. The anti-air gun, capable of hitting aircraft 2 kilometers in the sky, demonstrated powerful penetration force, turning its lethal capability in forest warfare. Those trees and bushes blocking the view were pierced together by the bullets. 5 Japanese soldiers were carefully advancing when unexpectedly a burst of machine gun fire swept in. Limbs flew, 3 were instantly killed. One had a massive hole in his waist with intestines spilling out, and another's legs were severed, holding onto his amputated limbs as he cried out in agony. Miao Luan was completely unmoved, like a cold, merciless killing machine. He slightly adjusted his gun barrel and fired a short burst again. A platoon hadn't even understood what happened when more than half of them had already fallen in pools of blood. After firing, Miao Luan packed up his gun, jumped to a neighboring large tree, and searched for a better shooting angle, continuously sending 14.5mm bullets flying, reaping the lives of those Japanese soldiers bit by bit. Where is the enemy? Where exactly is that steel camp soldier? The bullets are coming from this side. Return fire quickly. No use, can't see anyone. The Japanese soldiers were driven mad by this form of attack where the enemy was invisible. Many soldiers, regardless of whether they could see or not, blindly fired toward the direction from which the bullets came. Most of the bullets were absorbed by the dense layers of the tropical rainforest, while Miao Luan's expression remained unchanged, his anti-aircraft gun continuously firing. Those carrying rocket launchers tried to get closer to find Miao Luan, but were killed en route, their rocket launchers falling into the muddy ground. As for anti-tank missiles, when you can't even see the person, guiding one became even more impossible. Under Miao Luan's slaughter, the number of soldiers in this Japanese infantry battalion visibly decreased. Especially those armed with various armor-piercing weapons were almost completely wiped out by Miao Luan. Once the enemy posed no threat anymore, Miao Luan finally stopped holding back and charged directly into the crowd, wielding a high-caliber machine gun and slaughtering anyone he encountered. The Japanese soldiers completely collapsed, unable to regroup, and scattered in flight. However, their actions did not save their lives. No matter where the enemy hid, they could hardly escape the detection of biological radar. And Miao Luan's speed in the forest was something these Japanese soldiers simply couldn't match. Together with the long range of the anti-aircraft machine gun, the fight didn't last long before Miao Luan had nearly wiped out the entire infantry battalion. Scenes similar to this one were not just happening here, but also in synchronization elsewhere. The moment Japan's troops entered the forest, they became the prey on the chopping board of the steel camp. As Miao Luan launched his attack, other steel camp soldiers also mobilized in small squads, groups of 3 attacking the troops of Japan and Chan country. Bang! Bang! Bang! Bang! Bang! Gatling machine guns spit out flames, a genetic warrior, each hand holding an M134 Gatling gun, connected to a huge ammunition box on his back through ammo belts, and the 7.62 casings clattered to the ground, deep enough to submerge a person's lower leg. This model of Gatling gun, with a maximum firing rate of 6,000 rounds per minute, had a recoil that didn't even make his body shake. Inheriting the split-seat worm genes, he was physically robust and terrifyingly powerful. Across from him, Japanese soldiers were torn apart, the remainder forced to hide behind towering trees or lay trembling in terror in the pits of slopes. Occasionally, someone would try to peek out with a rocket launcher, anti-tank rifle, or anti-tank missile in retaliation, but as soon as they showed their heads, they would burst open. Because just behind the dual-gun Gatling soldier stood a genetic warrior with sharp, eagle-like eyes, wearing a multi-barreled sniper-type biological armor, equipped with 6 semi-automatic sniper rifles that could be simultaneously controlled in different directions through this set of sniper biological armor. This genetic warrior inherited the honey-eyed worm genes, his eyes now becoming insect-like compound eyes, with a wide field of view that nearly covered the entire area. With his ultra-high dynamic visual response, before the enemy's hand could pull the trigger, their heads were already blasted open. Even if the enemy used cover or smoke grenades to attack, they were unsuccessful. In front of the two, there was another genetic warrior, carrying a modified flamethrower. The biological armor he wore was specially modified, called the Arson-type biological armor. Inside, unlike other biological armors that were loaded with ammunition, it was modified to be a fuel repository, storing up to 1,000 liters of special fuel, like a heavy-duty flame tank capable of spewing flames up to 200 meters, far surpassing the range of ordinary handheld flame guns by dozens of meters, more fitting to be called a flamethrower. Ordinary flamethrower soldiers couldn't handle the temperature of such a powerful flamethrower, as they would get scorched, but this genetic warrior inherited the fire slime worm genes, feeling no discomfort at high temperatures. Under the control of this genetic warrior, the thick flamethrower continuously spewed out a string of fire snakes, flames roaring and tumbling, engulfing Japanese soldiers who had no place to hide in a blaze of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, crying out as they fled from their cover, only to be turned into sieves by the Gatling. The 3 genetic warriors cooperated with each other, their inherited insect gene traits complementing each other well, and the protection and heavy ammunition load provided by the biological armor allowed the squad to run rampant, with 3 people pressuring hundreds, and swiftly annihilating them. The so-called defense and counterattack of the Japanese soldiers appeared as fragile as castles on the beach in front of these 3 genetic warriors, collapsing at the slightest touch. The only thing the Japanese soldiers could rely on was artillery and air forces, but the artillery units were now struggling to preserve themselves. On Sin Fan Avenue, the armored and fire support units had already been crushed, with tanks and armored vehicles emitting black smoke everywhere, rocket artillery and self-propelled howitzers blown into scrap metal. The thick-skinned tanks were also countered by the genetic warriors using anti-tank missiles or making a rapid assault to sneak up and attack the weaker rear armor of the tanks with rocket launchers, killing the crew inside. As for the Air Force, they had just been repelled. Those air defense missiles weren't just for show. Now only the ground forces could rely on themselves, but how could they withstand the assault of genetic warriors wearing biological armor? Hundreds of genetic warriors formed dozens of teams, these groups of 3, in the primal forests of the Ruakai Mountains, contending against tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers, causing a river of blood and a field of corpses. Rather than call it a war, it was more like a massacre. In just half an hour, the battle had already reached its end. The remaining soldiers gathered around Isaka Yusuke, looking fearfully at the steel camp soldiers closing in. Long live the Emperor! Banzai! Let's go down fighting! Kill them! Some fanatical Japanese soldiers, armed with explosives, guns, and rocket launchers, launched a suicidal assault on the genetic warriors. But this suicidal act caused no trouble for the genetic warriors and was easily wiped out. Isaka Yusuke didn't commit seppuku. Instead, he pulled out a pistol and stuck the barrel into his mouth. With monsters like these, my loss is not unjust. Isaka Yusuke laughed tragically. He hadn't expected the Jekka group to gain strength so quickly, that Steel Camp had evolved to this extent, leading to the annihilation of his vanguard here. He no longer had the face to return to his hometown and elders, nor did he wish to become a prisoner. Bang! The trigger of the pistol was pulled, and with the suicide of Isaka Yusuk, the battle officially came to an end. With only minor casualties, the battle ended in a complete victory for JECA Group. 10 minutes after the battle ended, a new batch of air support finally arrived, and the fighter jets were even equipped with special anti-radiation bombs to destroy ground air defense missile systems. But they were too late. When they arrived again, there were no friendly troops left at the scene. As for the steel camp soldiers, of course, they couldn't be seen and hit by their guided bombs. The squadron of warplanes could only circle in the sky for a while. After the reconnaissance plane took photos of the scene, they left with deep reluctance. In the forest thick with the smell of blood, Miao Luan watched the warplanes in the sky leave and slowly lowered his head. 3 brothers dead, 6 wounded. Miao Luan looked at the bodies, raised his hand to salute, and the genetic warriors behind him did the same. There are always accidents on the battlefield. Even the powerful genetic warriors couldn't be everywhere, and casualties were inevitable. Fortunately, it was in the forest where they had the advantage of terrain. If it had been on the plains, Steel Camp wouldn't have been able to withstand a steel torrent of tens of thousands of men. Commander, we've wiped out about 15,000 of the enemy, including a large number of armored units and long-range fire support. The exact tally will be provided later by the soldiers cleaning the battlefield. Send a report to headquarters. The second phase of Operation Green Cage is complete. Miao Luan nodded, issuing new orders to the others. Destroy the roads and bridges on Sin Fan Avenue, and use those blasted armored vehicles and tanks to block the road. Under Miao Luan's command, the steel camp soldiers began working together, stacking the blasted military vehicles on Sin Fan Avenue to blockade the road, preventing the rear vehicles from passing. At the same time, they destroyed many bridges along the way, leaving the Japanese soldiers and Chan country soldiers in the Ruakai Mountains with no way out. Looking out at the vast mountains, Miao Luan's eyes gradually grew excited, murmuring to himself, "This time, I can finally enjoy a good fight." What they had eliminated was only a vanguard in the Ruakai Mountains. Tens of thousands of troops from Japan and Chan country were still marching through the Ruakai Mountains. Now, this force was cut off from the rear by mudslides in the Scorpion Cloud Mountain, and blocked up ahead as well, leaving the mighty army of tens of thousands unwittingly trapped within the Ruakai Mountains. While Steel Camp was still busy, this attack had already begun to alarm the entire 8-nation group. Because it was clear to any perceptive person that the tens of thousands of their own troops in the Ruakai Mountains were now surrounded with the danger of being completely wiped out. Trapped in an encirclement, an army of 150,000 is besieged in the Ruakai Mountains. The 8-nation group is in peril. Sin Fan Avenue, a road of death, where 10,000 Allied troops fell, and JECA Group's Steel Camp deployed a mysterious force. Single soldier mecha? Just how strong is JECA Group's technological capability? A new military innovation, from biochemical soldiers to single soldier mecha. Where is humanity's future headed? Join us for an in-depth analysis of the civil war situation in Chan country, who will emerge victorious between the 8-nation group and JECA Group, the 2 major organizations. After the Steel Camp made its appearance, related news suddenly became rampant. As various countries were watching the war, the deployment of the Steel Camp was naturally detected by satellites. While the forest is not easy to survey, during the combat on Sin Fan Avenue, the genetic warriors would then appear within satellite view. But what really ignited this piece of news was actually a video uploaded by a surviving soldier from the battle. In this video, one could see a genetic warrior coated in forest camouflage paint, 3 meters tall, covered in all kinds of heavy firepower, holding a flamethrower in his left hand and carrying a heavy machine gun in his right, rampaging and slaughtering amidst the crowd. Countless bullets falling on the biological armor would be instantly deflected. Its movements were astoundingly fast, like an agile cheetah, as bullets continuously pierced through soldiers' bodies, blood and limbs flying in all directions. When encountering enemies hiding behind cover, the left-handed flamethrower would scorch them out like roasting mice, before being mowed down by the heavy machine gun. The video clip lasted only a short while, as the person filming, in a bid to escape, dared not linger. Once the video was uploaded to the internet, it immediately caused an uproar across the web. Because the video clearly captured that some heavy machine guns and sniper rifles bullets couldn't penetrate the 3-meter-tall metallic mecha. It's known that a 12.7mm Barrett equipped with armor-piercing incendiary bullets can penetrate armored vehicles. The shock this scene captured can only be imagined. Could this video be fake? Does JECA Group really have such terrifying combat-ready mecha? How did they develop it? That mecha is just too cool. I wonder if JECA Group would sell it? I personally would offer $100 million to purchase one. 100 steel camp soldiers eliminate an army of over 10,000, which included many armored units. Is the era of single-soldier mecha really upon us? When will our country's soldiers be fully equipped with it? If a million-strong army each had a suit, imagine that scene. I'm laughing so hard. Japan previously said JECA Group had no power to resist, yet they turned around and did this, wiping out 15,000 soldiers in one battle. An army of more than 100,000 trapped in the Ruakai Mountains is clearly a tactic of JECA Group. Perhaps all their previous preparations were for today. Today's battle reveals the true strength of JECA Group. I wondered how such a powerful JECA Group could perform so poorly in this conflict. They were aiming to consume their enemy in one fell swoop, targeting the elite troops of Chan Country and Japan. Besides the numerous discussions among netizens, various countries have also convened military-industrial conferences to discuss the development and application of single-soldier mecha. Soon, countries around the world began to introduce related mecha development plans and preparations. Because of the outstanding performance of the steel camp during this battle, 100 soldiers equipped with biological armor were able to combat and eliminate a modern army of over 10,000. The impact on the world was as immense as when the beautiful country engaged in information warfare in the Middle East. For all nations around the globe, it was an unprecedented military innovation and a shocking way to wage war. Especially for the major powers, they are fervently pursuing it. Fearing that if they don't keep up with this military innovation, they might be eliminated from contention in the future. Lagging behind means getting beaten, a truth that never changes. Even the beautiful country, a staunch adversary, began contacting various domestic military-industrial complexes, issuing emergency directives for the development of single-soldier mecha, while trying every means to acquire a set from JECA Group. You could say the deployment of the steel camp stirred the geopolitical situation of the world. But what these countries don't know is that the combat power of the steel camp comes not only from the biological armor, but also from the high-level heaven element protective suit, the Eye-Worm, and the formidable physical capabilities of the genetic warriors themselves. Even if they manage to develop a mecha with the same defensive capabilities as the biological armor, they would not be able to reach the combat effectiveness of the steel camp. Impossible, absolutely impossible. 100 people beating 15,000? Are you telling me a myth? At the Japan Command Center, upon learning the frontline situation, Commander Yoshimura Yuichi totally lost his composure and refused to believe the fact for a long time. General, this is the intelligence we've gathered from various sources. There shouldn't be much error. The 150,000 troops are now trapped in the Ruakai Mountains. JECA Group must be planning to strike at them. We must prepare in advance. We need more support, or our troops in the Ruakai Mountains will be in grave danger. The staff officers offered advice. With 150,000 troops trapped in the Ruakai Mountains, simply day-to-day eating, drinking, and relieving themselves represents a huge consumption. With the supply lines cut off, saying their situation is as precarious as eggs piled atop each other wouldn't be an exaggeration. Bam! Yoshimura Yuichi suddenly stood up, teeth clenched. Inform the troops to turn around on the spot and head back. We can't continue advancing. Have someone clear the mudslide at Scorpion Cloud Mountain as soon as possible. In addition, I will contact the 8-Nation Group and, in the meantime, Northern Chan Country warlords will assist in drawing JECA Group's attention. With the help of warlords from the northern border of Chan Country, the JECA Group certainly couldn't devote all their efforts to the battle in the Ruakai Mountains, but would also be sandwiched by us, and it was uncertain who would end up surrounded by whom. When they heard this, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. With those warlords' involvement from Chan Country's northern border, This backup plan would definitely distract the Jekka group significantly, allowing the rescue of the 150,000-strong army trapped in the Ruakai Mountains. Although the capabilities of those warlords were questionable, they didn't need to defeat the Jekka group. They only needed to buy time to safely withdraw their own troops from the Ruakai Mountains, which would be a great accomplishment. When the meeting was over, this order was quickly transmitted. Concerning the life and death of 150,000 troops, it did not allow any delay. In Chan Country's northern territory, Wu Angli received the notification to deploy troops. As he watched a video on his computer of a battle involving Steel Camp genetic soldiers, he already regretted having agreed too quickly to the CIA, which now put him in a difficult position. The Jekka group was not powerless in this war. If the 6 warlords in the northern territory attacked now, they would likely become the primary target of the Jekka group, drawing fire for Japan and the Chan Country government. Wu Angli understood this very clearly. This war, we cannot fight it. Let's just wait and see. Let the 8-nation group and the Jekka group fight it out. We can't enter the fray now. Wu Angli muttered to himself. Their warlords were just fair-weather friends, and he did not wish to die for others. Just as Wu Angli made up his mind and was about to convey his thoughts to his subordinates, his cell phone suddenly started vibrating. The phone's screen lit up. Photos had been sent to his phone, all of them of his family members. His son, daughter, wife, mother, photos of all of them were there. Following this, a call came through, and it was the number that CIA agent Lloyd had left him. Lloyd, what the hell does the CIA want? As soon as the phone connected, Wu Angli roared. If Lloyd were standing in front of him right now, he would have surely ordered his execution. Mr. Wu, this is our sincerity. If you carry out the troop deployment as instructed, we will ensure your family's safety. But if you think about reneging, don't say it's your family. Do you think our missiles aren't accurate enough? Believe it or not, I could give an order right now, and a cruise missile would launch from a destroyer at sea, heading right for your residence. On the other end of the phone, Lloyd's tone was ominously direct with his threats. Wu Angli's face turned ashen. He said, "When did I ever say I'd renege? Release my family immediately or I—" Haha, Mr. Wu, what do you think our CIA intelligence is for? Whatever you discussed with those warlords last night, don't think we don't know. Oh, I forgot to mention, we've also asked the families of the other warlords to visit. You don't need to worry about them. Hearing Lloyd's words, Wu Angli was initially stunned. Then he glanced at his phone, that globally renowned brand with the Apple logo, partially bitten. You implanted a backdoor in my phone? Are spying on me? Wu Angli knew where the problem lay. He had always been under CIA surveillance. This is a necessary measure, Mr. Wu. Now tell me your decision. Do you choose to cooperate with the dominating power of Blue Star, or reject our friendship and become our enemy? You're a smart man. Don't make a decision you'll regret for the rest of your life. Lloyd chuckled, leaving the choice to Wu Angli, confident that Wu Angli would make the right decision. After a silence of several seconds, Wu Angli gritted his teeth and said, "Fine. I agree to your terms. I will attack the Jekka group." Having said that, Wu Angli added, "Also, I now request to immediately go to the Chan Country capital, Yang City. You must ensure my safety and bring my family along. Staying here, I fear the Jekka group might act against us." Initially, Wu Angli wanted to sit back and watch the two sides clash, but the CIA forced his hand. He also feared the Jekka group might target him in a decapitation strike. The Averson family's recent example showed that the Jekka group's methods were no less drastic than the CIA's. Thus, he wanted to relocate to the Chan Country capital, controlling the military operations remotely through his trusted subordinates. All right, now go order your troops to attack. Let us see your sincerity. Your family's safety will be under our protection, Lloyd said. Lloyd's tone relaxed as he welcomed the initiative of the hostages wanting to come to him. At the request of the CIA, 6 northern warlords came together to issue a public statement. The Jekka group must immediately cease fire and allow peace to return to Chan Country. Chan Country belongs to all its people, not as a private property of the Jekka group. All the people of Chan Country, Please stand together to resist the tyranny of the Jekka group. Otherwise, this war will sweep across the entire territory of Chan country. This statement was released and many were surprised by it. After all, wasn't it you warlords who caused the civil war within Chan country up to now? Now talking about peace is as ridiculous as a lion turning vegetarian, causing anyone who heard it to laugh. However, the 6 northern warlords obviously didn't care about public opinion. On the day they released their statement, they chose the same day to boldly dispatch their troops and invade East Chin State, which was under the control of the Jekka group. Once again, the conflict escalated from the disputes with the Chan country government and Japan, now including several unscrupulously evil warlords. At this moment, from the map, the territories controlled by the warring factions covered most of Chan country. It could be said that almost the entire Chan country was engulfed in the flames of war. East Chin State. Su Jie watched Wu Anglui's speech on TV, shook his head, and chuckled. Just a puppet manipulated by the CIA, and yet he has the audacity to talk about peace, utterly oblivious to his doom. Lu Yingying was sitting in Su Jie's arms, whispering, "Su Jie, we have completed the arrangements according to the plan. 6 mountain infantry divisions and 1 mechanized infantry division will be responsible for occupying the northern territory. The Jekka group's regular soldiers numbered 24,000, and the force mobilized this time exceeded 80,000, showing significant respect for these 6 warlords. These 6 warlords are of no concern. The troops in the Ruakai Mountains are our primary targets." Su Jie was well aware of the military discipline of the warlord soldiers. Their capacity to fight back and forth with the Chan country government wasn't because these warlord soldiers were particularly strong, but because both sides were ineffectually pecking at each other. The Chan country government army had the advantage of better equipment, while these warlords had the geographical advantage, taking advantage of their familiarity with the terrain to wage guerrilla warfare against the Chan country government. Naturally, the latter could hardly cope with them. But in front of the Jekka group, attempting guerrilla warfare with super soldiers seemed utterly foolish. Su Jie. I've also received news that the vice president of the beautiful country visited Siam yesterday and met with the king of Siam. There are reports that the beautiful country is trying to incite Siam to send troops to enter Chan country and join the battle against us. How despicable is the beautiful country, stirring up wars everywhere to confront us. Lu Yingying brought up another piece of news. As the situation in the Ruakai Mountains deteriorated, the beautiful country was becoming restless. Fearing the Chan country government wouldn't hold up, the beautiful country planned to call on Siam, also a member of the 8-nation group, to formally send troops into Chan country to combat the Jekka group. The reason is simple. The beautiful country constantly interferes and foments wars because war is profitable, destruction and death are profitable. They value profits more than human lives. Su Jie's expression remained calm. The stakes represented by the Jekka group had even the dominant power of Blue Star salivating. Just as they would wage wars for oil interests, they could also initiate wars against the Jekka group. It's unlikely that Siam will send troops, as our territories don't border each other currently, and military negotiations are not so easily settled. By the time they agree on a plan, our local war might well be over, said Su Jie as he analyzed the situation. Siam was economically strong in Southeast Asia, and its economy was still growing. Although a Western-aligned country and a member of the 8-nation group, they would definitely not easily agree to join a war with an uncertain outcome. This is different from merely supplying materials and ammunition, as war means people will die. After reassuring Lu Yingying, advising her not to worry too much, and watching the news end on TV, Su Jie sneered, "If they want to encircle Wei to save Zhao through the Northern Territory warlords, then I will unapologetically feast on them, since I have quite an appetite." East Chin State. With the deployment of Jekka group forces, a massive military contingent of 80,000 entered the northern forests, engaging in battle with 6 warlord factions. Bang! In the forest, Jasa Mountain calmly pulled the trigger of his rifle. A bullet pierced the forehead of a warlord soldier hidden in the bushes, planning an ambush. Bang! Bang! He fired again, and 2 warlord soldiers ambushing from a tree fell headlong. The next moment, Jasa Mountain rolled swiftly. Several bullets hit the spot where he had just stood. Jasa Mountain returned fire, his bullets sweeping accurately across, accompanied by screams, and a hand grenade flew past, eventually bringing everything back to silence amidst the smoke. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Jasa Mountain replaced his magazine and picked up his radio to report. Cleared 13 warlord soldiers. Please report on the remaining enemy movements. After a few seconds, a voice came through the radio. Jasa Mountain, 8 kilometers ahead to your right. There is another battle erupting. Support there. Understood. Jasa Mountain collected a few magazines from the ground, swallowed a strengthening pill, then quickly ran toward the position mentioned over the radio. As a second-class super soldier, he had been sweeping missions in the northern border mountains for 3 days. It first started when 6 warlord factions from the Northern Territory infiltrated the mountains of East Chin State, but after the decision by Jekka Group to dispatch forces, within just 2 days, not only were the invaders driven out of East Chin State, but the troops also pushed into areas like Kuchin, Guagan, and Wabang in the Northern Territory, turning the tide of the battle. Swiftly rushing to the target area, as he neared, Jasa Mountain heard intense gunfire. There, a first-class super soldier clad in alloy battle armor, wielding a Gatling gun, was striding forward. The warlord soldiers in his path were being shattered, their limbs detached, their viscera scattered. Behind this first-class super soldier were several second-class and third-class super soldiers providing support, along with a platoon of infantry. The over 100 warlord soldiers facing them had completely collapsed. Their attempt at guerrilla warfare was a joke in front of the super soldiers' heightened senses and sharpshooting. Not to mention the presence of a first-class super soldier, a level of combat power that had once been the trump card of Steel Camp. Run, we can't fight, we simply can't. It's a first-class super soldier. How can such a being be here? My leg's broken. Hurry and drag me with you. Don't leave me behind. Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'm willing to surrender. The warlord soldiers scattered in terror, accustomed to guerrilla fighting in the forests, carrying few heavy weapons and relying mainly on lighter arms. Who would have expected to encounter a first-class super soldier? Their alloy battle armor was virtually impervious to ordinary rifles. The few rocket launchers and heavy machine guns they carried were quickly neutralized by the super soldiers, leaving them with no means to penetrate the enemy defenses. The already frail combat will of the warlord soldiers crumbled after a dozen casualties. The remaining soldiers either surrendered on the spot or turned and ran. Seeing this, Jasa Mountain joined in the pursuit of the fleeing soldiers. Half an hour later, in the forest, Jasa Mountain returned carrying his rifle, with several captives bound hands in tow. 60-some had been captured. The combat will of these warlord soldiers was poor, with casualties reaching just 10%. They either surrendered or broke ranks. After all, they were an army bred from various illegal and criminal activities, suited only to low-intensity guerrilla wars. Facing super soldiers, their casualty rate soared. They simply couldn't handle a tough fight. Similar situations occurred sporadically throughout the Northern Territory. 80,000 soldiers from the Jekka Group, along with super soldiers, engaged in guerrilla warfare around the forests. The warlord soldiers, once confident in their guerrilla warfare, were harshly disciplined. One after another, their positions and territories were overtaken and garrisons removed, incorporated under the rule of Jekka Group. Jekka Group's advance was incredibly smooth, fighting in the vast mountains, in the rapid inland rivers, near numerous villages. Just the 80,000 Jekka security personnel, not to mention the super soldiers, alone in terms of personal skill and equipment, far surpassed the numerous warlord soldiers. Those warlord soldiers, despite all their talk, were raised primarily through various illegal means of extortion, mainly through the profits from opium. This earned money firstly satisfied the personal lives and material pleasures of the warlords. The army was a secondary concern. Being equipped with a rifle and a military uniform was considered sufficient for a soldier. After all, the Chan country government army they were up against was of similar standard, just with more heavy weapons, which were also unnecessary in guerrilla warfare in the forests. Meanwhile, Jekka Group soldiers were trained by highly paid, retired military instructors. With Jekka Group's annual revenue of hundreds of billions of US dollars, it was nothing to outfit an infantry troop. An example would be one of Jekka Group's mechanized infantry squads, where every soldier was equipped with a bulletproof vest and tactical helmet. Each also had an individual communication system. A squad of 10 soldiers possessed an infantry fighting vehicle, 8 assault rifles, 1 light machine gun, and 1 precision marksman rifle. Additionally, 2 soldiers carried gun-mounted grenade launchers, and there were up to 3 multipurpose single-use rocket launchers and 1 cloud bomb rocket launcher, which were disposable and thrown away after use. The team was also equipped with corresponding drones. Mountain infantry heavy weapons would be accordingly reduced, but the proportion of super soldiers within the ranks would greatly increase. As for the heavy combined brigades, the Jekka Group currently only has 2, entirely equipped with heavy weapons, main battle tanks, armored vehicles, field air defense missile vehicles, rocket artillery, anti-tank missile launchers, self-propelled howitzers, self-propelled mortars, and self-propelled high-altitude artillery. Just these armored and fire support units alone number in the hundreds. Including all sorts of logistic transport and support vehicles, a single heavy combined brigade like this would cost several billion US dollars. Those hard-strapped warlords, let alone not being able to cough up that much money, wouldn't bear to allocate those funds even if they had them. The financially robust Jekka Group certainly wouldn't shortchange its own soldiers, and this money wasn't spent in vain. It shows in combat with the warlords. With equivalent forces, not accounting for the existence of super soldiers, Jekka Group soldiers can also thoroughly thrash the warlords' troops. In a short period of time, Jekka security continued to expand and seize territory, forcing those 6 warlord families to flee helter-skelter. Shiko Town. This was a village under the jurisdiction of the Kiegan Alliance Army. The village wasn't large, nestled in the densely forested environment of the Northern Territory. It had been cultivated into layers of terraced fields, a hidden paradise amid the woods. But this paradise grew not the usual food crops or economic plants, but swaying poppy flowers. Emerging from the dense forest, Chief Jia came with 2 infantry squads to this place. They were tracking down a group of warlord soldiers who had fled in defeat, likely hiding in this village. Several young cowherds spotted Chief Jia and immediately sprinted back to the village to alert the adults. "Trouble, trouble! Bad people are coming!" Hearing the children shouting, Chief Jia touched his face and asked the soldiers beside him, "Do I look very fierce?" The soldier glanced at Chief Jia covered in blood, his hair matted in clumps, some wounds bandaged, exuding an aura of death. If he, a soldier, were to encounter Chief Jia abruptly, he'd shudder, let alone the children. He chuckled awkwardly and said, "Brother Jia, those kids are talking nonsense." Chief Jia smiled, aware of his own image. Outside, they called them super soldiers, walking demons. Many enemies, upon hearing the name super soldier, let alone seeing them, would go weak in the knees. This place is Opium Village. Turning to glance at the poppy flowers growing in the fields, Chief Jia, a native of Chan country, was all too familiar with them. A substantial part of the infamous Golden Triangle lay within the territory of Chan country, and its citizens could recognize the flower at a glance. In Chan country, especially in areas of the Northern Territory riddled with warlords, opium was a significant industry for many. The warlords had the local farmers plant it due to the political instability and the fact that the mountainous terrain was not as suitable for agricultural crops as the plains were. To add to that, the warlords deliberately suppressed prices, making it unprofitable for farmers to grow food crops. If they wanted to earn money, they had to choose to cultivate opium. The warlords would provide seeds, chemical fertilizers, and irrigation systems and offer loans. Once the crops were harvested, the warlords would take charge of the purchasing, with no risk of unsold goods, and the prices were often twice the revenue from growing food crops. The prohibition of opium in Chan country was never completely effective, and many times it could actually be traced back to economic issues. It wasn't something that could be resolved just by destroying warlords. If one warlord was killed, and in the absence of a stable economy and alternative income sources, the farmers would still choose to cultivate opium because they had no other choice. As Chief Jia was observing, many villagers of all ages ran out, some wielding old hunting rifles, looking warily at Chief Jia and his fully armed soldiers. "What brings you gentlemen here?" "I am Sanka, the village chief of Shiko village." A man with dark skin, a lean build, and hands full of calluses approached. "Greetings, fellow villager. My name is Jasa Mountain, assigned to the security department of the Jekka Group, the 14th Mountain Brigade's reconnaissance unit. We're here chasing a group of warlord soldiers." Chief Jia glanced at the villagers holding old-fashioned hunting guns, and then stepped forward to shake hands with the village chief named Sanka. "Chief Jia, what you're talking about, these warlord soldiers, our village has always been inhabited by our own people. We've never had any warlord soldiers come here." Sanka shook his head, outright rejecting Chief Jia's claim without a second thought. For Sanka, those warlord soldiers were precisely the troops of the Keegan Alliance army, who ruled the area. If he betrayed them, who would buy the opium he grew in the future? "We'll search on our own." One impatient soldier spoke up, ready to take matters into his own hands and search for themselves. "No, our village does not welcome outsiders." Sanka stood in front, and the villagers immediately became agitated, brandishing hoes, scythes, and old-fashioned hunting rifles, shouting that no one was allowed in. "Stop! Put down your guns." Watching as the situation might escalate, Jasa Mountain waved his hand, indicating to the Jekka security soldiers not to aim their guns at the villagers. Village Chief sang, "You know what Jekka Group does, right?" Standing in front of Sanka, Jasa Mountain thought of the training he had received in the army, and a friendly smile appeared on his face, though the bloodstains on him hardly made it seem friendly. "I've heard about Jekka Group. We do watch TV and listen to the radio." Sanka nodded, indicating that he was aware of Jekka Group. "Then it will be easier. May I ask, how much does your village earn per capita from cultivating opium?" Jasa Mountain, following the scripted persuasion tactics, initiated the inquiry. "Our annual income from opium amounts to about 1.5 million Zen coins. Chan country itself, among Southeast Asian countries, is one of the extremely poor and backward nations, and the Northern Territory, with its mountainous and forested environment, is the poorest part of Chan country." The figure of 1.5 million Zen coins might sound substantial, but when converted, it's only worth about 1,000 US dollars, which is roughly 6 to 7,000 Hua Yuan a year. This income is only possible with opium cultivation. Were they to farm food crops, the figure would have. One can imagine the poverty of these farmers, who, though cultivating opium themselves, earn but the most minimal and negligible profits in the entire opium sales chain. Village Chief sang, "My family also used to farm in our village, and the income was about the same. But do you know how much our per capita income has increased since Jekka Group came?" "How much?" Sanka's curiosity was piqued by Jasa Mountain's words, and the surrounding villagers felt the same. "This much." Miao Luan stretched out all 5 fingers on his right hand. 5 million Zen coins? That much? Sanka's mouth dropped open in shock. Not 5 million Zen coins, around 5,000 US dollars. Jasa Mountain corrected Sanka's misunderstanding and revealed the staggering figure to the entire Shiko village. 5,000 US dollars, my goodness. How could one even spend all that money? I've never seen so much money at once in my entire life. They must be bluffing. I've heard that Jekka Group is super rich. They sell a lot of medicines and make money off foreigners. The villagers were discussing fervently, only half convinced by Jasa Mountain's claims. Our Jekka Group's insect farming business is incredibly developed, just like your opium cultivation, where people only need to take care of the insects, and Jekka Group will handle the rest by purchasing them. How about it, fellow villagers, why not join us in insect farming? It's far more profitable than growing opium. Jasa Mountain cajoled them persistently. If warlords bound these farmers with economic interests, then Jekka Group would crush them with even more substantial economic benefits. When it comes to money, those warlords can't hold a candle to Jekka Group. Not just these minor warlords, but even the entire economy of Chan country, with an annual GDP of just over 500 billion US dollars, is not as high as the net profit of Jekka Group in 1 year. Frankly speaking, Jekka Group could financially sustain Chan country without any issue. Village Chief Sanka's lips quivered slightly, And after a long pause, he spoke, "Is that true? Is insect farming really that profitable?" As he spoke, his heart was already racing with excitement. Village chief sang, "Whether what I'm saying is true or false, just ask around a bit and you will know. You can take people to visit the areas under the control of the Jekka Group. Then you'll naturally understand if the Jekka Group is as I've described." Seeing Sanka's eager eyes, Jasa Mountain knew that his speech had not been in vain. He still remembered a lesson from back then, which was taught by General Su, and one sentence had resonated with him deeply ever since. "We don't engage in any formalism. We solve whatever the farmers need most, solving the poverty issues of tens of millions of people. And only then will the entire Northern Territory, the entire Chan country accept us." Jasa Mountain always remembered this sentence, and he followed it too. To break the long-standing foundation of warlord rule here, and the deeply ingrained concept of growing opium, the problems had to be solved from the root. And the so-called root problem was actually about making money, eating enough, and living a stable life, which was something the Jekka Group was completely capable of achieving. "We need to see it, we must go see it." Sanka nodded repeatedly. He had been to the town before, where he heard from others that the wages in the areas under the rule of the Jekka Group were several times theirs. But under the warlord's control, the Jekka Group was a strictly forbidden topic of discussion. Plus, with Shiko village located in the mountains and having no internet or such, his understanding of the Jekka Group was limited to what he learned from watching TV or listening to the radio in town, which was quite limited. Now that he heard Jasa Mountain's explanation, he realized that the areas under the Jekka Group were indeed lucrative places. "Folks, you all can switch to breeding poison insects, given that the yield of farming in your mountainous environment is very low, but if you switch to insect breeding, your environment is naturally suited for it." The villagers looked at one another. Someone couldn't help but ask loudly, "Officer, is it really that profitable? We will definitely join you." Seeing one speak up, the other villagers also became enthusiastic. "I want to visit the places under the Jekka Group, but I can't afford the travel expenses. Can I still go? I'm good at breeding insects. I used to catch lots of insects and breed them when I was young. I bred them really well, nobody in this village did it better than me." "Cut the crap, Wu Lao-san. Every time you and I competed with insects, you always ended up beaten badly by me. When it comes to breeding insects, I, Xiaoping, am the #1 in Shiko village." The atmosphere among the villagers grew even more heated as they discussed fervently. Seeing this scene, Jasa Mountain smiled. "Folks, can you tell me now where the warlord soldiers are?" With Jasa Mountain's remark, the environment became silent again. In the end, it was Sanka who made the decision. "I'll take you." Sanka knew that by taking this gamble, if he was right, Shiko village would soar. As for failure, in recent days, the village had already seen more than one group of fleeing soldiers nearby. Those warlords were already on the verge of being annihilated and naturally couldn't come back for revenge. Sanka saw this clearly. Under Sanka's lead, several rebels hiding in the village eventually surrendered dejectedly, hands held high, and were captured by Jasa Mountain. Shiko village was just a small representation of the larger battlefield, with many villages and towns economically bound by warlords like Shiko village. In the past, even if the government army could defeat the warlord soldiers, it was helpless against those who disaggregated and hid among the civilians. Warlord soldiers had the support of local people, which is a base of masses that outsiders found hard to shake. This was also why warlords could not be exterminated and could always resurge from the ashes. But when the Jekka Group intervened, they used the simplest tactic, spreading money, to easily dissolve the warlord's local base of mass support. Not only in the countryside but also in the cities, the Jekka Group's actions were more aggressive. Python Mountain City, a city under the Zen State Liberation Front. By this time, the city had been completely conquered by the Jekka Group. Large numbers of Jekka Group soldiers entered the city and immediately cleaned out the casinos, brothels, scam parks, and all kinds of criminal powers. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You saved my life. You really saved my life. You must not let those devils go. I beg you. My family was killed by them. You must not let these inhumane fiends go. Jekka Group, "Oh, thank heavens you finally came over. I thought I wouldn't live to see this day." In a public square, survivors rescued from the scam parks wept and laughed, overwhelmed to the point of tears. Many of them were covered in scars, with beatings and bruises being the most common, but also burns from cigarette butts, chopped off fingers, deep knife scars on faces, and some missing ears or noses. They were all rescued by JECA Group soldiers. Despite many of them being in such a tragic state, they were actually considered lucky. The truly tragic ones had already been tortured to death, with their internal body parts removed and sold for high prices. There were many JECA soldiers maintaining order on site, as most of the civilians of Python Mountain City had gathered, wanting to see what the JECA Group that had newly taken over Python Mountain City intended to do. "Bring up the criminals." In the square, an officer shouted, and men and women were escorted onto a constructed platform. Placards thrust high behind their necks bore their crimes: intentional homicide, forced women, gambling, illegal detention, opium trafficking, human trafficking, organ trafficking. As the accused were led onto the stage, many civilians from Python Mountain City recognized that these were notable figures from their community. Once influential tycoons and bigwigs had now become prisoners. Prisoner brought forth, Huang Junyun, aged 48, previously owner of Jingyan Technology Park, engaged in various scams, kidnappings, extortions, causing disability and deaths. Wu Jinggu, aged 52, engaged in illegal human organ trade, and estimated to have murdered and buried victims, his actions deplorable. Wu Pin, aged 61. One by one, the crimes were announced, and many of the men captured wet their pants, their past arrogance gone, with many crying out in earth-shattering screams. Of course, some, knowing they were doomed, ceaselessly cursed the JECA Group in helpless rage. "I have money. I still have lots of money in foreign banks. Let me go. I'll give you all that money if you release me. It's not my fault. It was the warlords themselves who wanted to fight the JECA Group. I was always against it. I'm one of you. Damn you, JECA Group. May you rot in hell. How dare you capture me? Let me tell you, my father is..." The expressions of those led to the high platform ranged from ferocious to tearful to remorseful, displaying all the vicissitudes of life. Beneath the platform, survivors from various dark forces, seeing those who had once oppressed them, had bloodshot eyes as they hurled trash and miscellaneous objects, striking many and drawing blood. Had the JECA Group soldiers not intervened, these people might have stormed the platform and torn the scoundrels to pieces. Even the ordinary citizens of Python Mountain City joined in the barrage. After all, these so-called dignitaries had never done anything good. Involved in various nefarious activities, they had caused countless bloody crimes locally, protected by warlords, and naturally, the people of Python Mountain City had suffered greatly. Fearful of the warlords' tyranny in the past, now with the JECA Group advocating for them, they wished for nothing more than swift retribution. The local people resented the warlords, except those involved in illegal activities, who harbored no good feelings toward the warlords. Since warlords aren't the government, they don't address public welfare, let alone allocate funds for roads, schools, hospitals, power stations, or water supply, making their territories some of the poorest. By contrast, although the Chan country government is corrupt, it still allocates a small amount annually to education and health, certainly better than the miserly warlords. With such poor infrastructure, it was hard for citizens to earn money. Coupled with unchecked illegal practices that contributed to lawlessness, it naturally made city residents incapable of empathizing with the warlords. The animated crowd was held back by soldiers of the JECA Group, particularly by several first-class super soldiers clad in alloy battle armor, whose chilling aura deterred anyone from approaching, leaving the public no choice but to lodge complaints from below. "That bastard was the one who broke my Achilles tendon. I wish I could kill him right now. My wife was taken away by him. Just because I didn't meet my targets. He cut off both my ears, he must be killed. Kill them. Kill them. Kill them." The shouting grew louder and more uniform, filled with murderous intent. 10 criminals, their crimes warrant death, sentenced to execution by shooting, to be carried out immediately. After the judge read out all the crimes, he indeed did not disappoint, pronouncing the sentence on the spot, eliciting cheers from the crowd below. Bang, bang, bang. The soldiers of the Jekka group picked up their rifles and pulled the trigger at the people kneeling on the ground. No matter how glorious these individuals were at this moment, in front of the Jekka group's peanut-sized bullets, they could only become cold corpses. Batch after batch of criminals were brought onto the high platform for execution. In times of chaos, harsh measures were used. The Jekka group had no sympathy for this scum and resolutely sent their souls to the afterlife with a bullet. As the dark forces from these cities were eradicated and coupled with Jekka's promise of upcoming major infrastructure projects, the local support for the Jekka group soared, eliminating any worries about falling into a civil war of security. Having dismantled the warlords' ruling foundation locally, the Jekka group was unstoppable, their 80,000 soldiers sweeping through the territory and delivering crushing blows to 6 warlord families. In just 3 days of combat, the seemingly numerous troops of these 6 warlord families retreated again and again without putting up much resistance, surrendering their territories without a fight as casualties remained under 20,000. Their will to fight and combat skills truly shocked spectators around the world. However, the most eye-catching aspect of this battle was the appearance of the first-class super soldier. People were surprised to find that the ace soldiers, originally from Steel Camp, were now assigned to regular units, which was a major reason why the warlord forces collapsed so quickly. A first-class super soldier could achieve startling casualty ratios even against armies from major countries. Saying they were fighting below their dimension against the warlord forces is not an exaggeration by any means. The 6 warlord families closest to the Zen State Liberation Front were entirely occupied by the Jekka group, demonstrating sheer ease throughout the operations. However, for the 8-nation group, this news was far from wonderful. Especially for the Japan troops involved in the airstrike operations, Yoshimura Yuichi could not understand where so many soldiers of the Jekka group had come from, and how they were so well supplied with weapons and ammunition. Damn it! Where did the Jekka group get so many soldiers from? Could it be that they were just hastily recruited to fill numbers? But that doesn't seem right. Yoshimura Yuichi looked at the telegraph of the battle in the Northern Territory, his face full of confusion and perplexity. Their previous airstrikes had clearly destroyed most of the Jekka group's military bases and supplies within their territory. The opposing soldiers should have been disorganized by now. How could they possibly emerge from the ground as suddenly as they did, pulling together 70,000 to 80,000 troops that threw the 6 warlord families into disarray? Actually, Yoshimura Yuichi wasn't wrong. Those soldiers of the Jekka group did indeed seem to have emerged from the ground. Speaking of which, these warlord soldiers are really too trashy, aren't they? It's only been 3 days, and they've already collapsed. Reconsidering the combat strength of the warlord soldiers, Yoshimura Yuichi became even more speechless. Knowing that the warlord soldiers were weak was one thing, but he hadn't expected them to be this incompetent. While the Chan Country government army had been fighting back and forth with these warlords, if not for the military training support provided by the 8-nation group to the Chan Country army, he feared their comrades would also be of such poor quality. Where has our army in the Ruakai Mountains reached? Yoshimura Yuichi asked his staff officer. Now that they couldn't count on the warlord side, tying up Jekka Group's 80,000 troops was considered a success. What Yoshimura Yuichi truly cared about now was the 150,000 troops in the Ruakai Mountains. They were the most capable troops within the borders of Chan Country. If they were entirely destroyed, Chan Country would be in danger, and he, as the commander-in-chief, would have to face military court. The staff officer spread out the map and said, "Our troops have withdrawn smoothly, and the 150,000 troops have combined and retreated to this area of Yongling Mountain, 3 days' march from exiting the Ruakai Mountains. Since the continuous heavy rain has made marching difficult, we have already ordered the entire army to be on alert for attacks from the Jekka group. The opposing forces have tried everything to block our troops within the Ruakai Mountains, clearly aiming to annihilate our forces. When can Scorpion Cloud Mountain be fully cleared? We are coordinating various engineering machines and manpower to dig tirelessly around the clock. We have issued a military order to completely open it up within 5 days. Notify the combat aircraft to patrol with ammunition loaded. all-day reconnaissance, and early warning aircraft to scout the Ruakai Mountains without missing any trace. With the continuous attacks from the Jekka Group, Yoshimura Yuichi realized the formidable nature of the Jekka Group, and under no circumstances did he want to be caught off guard by them. Ruakai Mountains, Hongue Bridge. A massive army was advancing here. This army, numbering a staggering 150,000 men, was a mixed force of Japan and Chan country, stretching for dozens of kilometers, rolling along like a long dragon. To prevent ambushes by the Jekka Group, the Japanese and Chan country troops in the Ruakai Mountains had now integrated their troops together, effectively fortifying themselves against being divided and conquered by the Jekka Group. But both Japan and Chan country had underestimated the appetite of the Jekka Group. Even if they gathered all their troops, they would still become prey in the eyes of the Jekka Group. At a mountaintop, Su Jie quietly watched the vast army passing over the Hongue Bridge. Such a huge march could not be hidden. "General Su, the brother units are all in position," said Miao Luin, the commander of the Steel Camp, standing beside him. Now gathered here were not only the entire Steel Camp genetic warriors but also a large number of super soldiers drawn from various units, totaling more than 1,000 people. Additionally, there were 2 of the Jekka Group's most elite mountain warfare brigades, totaling 9,000 men, lying in wait scattered throughout the surrounding forests. Relying on night marches and the natural concealment of the forest, they had avoided detection by satellites and reconnaissance aircraft and had come nearby. "Are you afraid now? The enemy you are facing is 100 times your number." Su Jie slowly turned around and asked Miao Luin. "General Su, we are the Steel Camp. The ones who should be afraid are the Japanese soldiers," Miao Luin said flatly, showing no sign of pre-battle tension. Behind Miao Luin, the Steel Camp genetic soldiers were just as composed, their eyes only showing excitement. These warriors, most loyal to the Jekka Group, couldn't wait to strike, to clear the obstacles for the Jekka Group. "Good. Let's show those Japanese soldiers whose territory this is," Su Jie said, patting Miao Luin on the waist where he wore his biological armor. "Now, as the highest-ranking officer of the Jekka Group, I order you to become the nightmare of the Japanese soldiers," Su Jie commanded. "Yes, General Su, rest assured, all soldiers of the Steel Camp guarantee the completion of the mission," Miao Luin responded, saluting along with the soldiers of the Steel Camp, then conveyed the combat command. "All units, have the artillery fire first, cut off their retreat." Miao Luin knew the key to this battle, and at this moment, he was incredibly solemn. Boom! Boom! Boom! The deafening sound of artillery filled the air as the Genetic Warriors artillery unit used 120mm mortars. The heavy shells fell on the Hongue Bridge, blowing the bridge apart, and vehicles, including tanks and armored cars, as well as crying soldiers, fell into the murky river waters. The abrupt artillery barrage threw the massive army of 150,000 into confusion. The seasoned Genetic Warrior artillerymen covered the area with rapid fire in just 1 minute, and then promptly packed up and evacuated to avoid counter-artillery radar locking and retaliation from self-propelled guns. While on the move, the Genetic Warriors continued firing at the vastly outnumbered Ingchan forces. However, the Ingchan forces retaliated swiftly, and the roar of warplanes was heard overhead as they searched for and bombed the Genetic Warrior artillery positions. Thankfully, the dense forest provided excellent cover and concealment. Despite some casualties from the bombardment, the artillery fire never ceased. "Blow up the dam of the Hugu Reservoir," Su Jie ordered a new combat directive. Upstream on the Seiden River, due to continuous heavy rains, a huge reservoir had accumulated too much water. This reservoir was built by the early colonial troops when the precious timber of the Ruakai Mountains in Chan country was abundant. Colonizers had the local people construct the Hugu Reservoir. The purpose was to manage and store water in this section of the Seiden River, to make the river flow more gently, which would benefit their timber transport using river navigation in this relatively gentle section. Upon receiving the message, the Jekka Group's engineers who had been waiting there swiftly pressed the detonator, setting off the massive amount of explosives planted beneath the dam. Boom! The explosives blew open the dam, and the water stored in the reservoir, like a wild horse breaking free, mixed with a large amount of sediment to form a surging flood that rushed downstream along the Sidon River. Soon, the Ingchan troops engaged in combat several kilometers away heard strange noises, with a thunderous rumble coming from upstream. With no time for much reaction, soldiers on both sides of the Sidon River opened their mouths agape, realizing the source of the noise. They saw what seemed like a rampaging yellow dragon sweeping towards them, as floodwaters carrying broken branches and rocks rushed down from upstream, pouring into the already tumultuous river. The thunderous sound that smacked the riverbanks also maximally shook the hearts of the soldiers witnessing it all, turning their faces deathly pale. A flood! The flood is coming! The upstream dam has burst! Run! What are you waiting for? After a brief moment of shock, the soldiers scrambled to escape like madmen. But human legs could never outrun a flood. The roaring waters, like a ferocious beast, pounced on the panic-stricken soldiers, engulfing them and sweeping them downstream. At least several thousand soldiers were washed away, and this was just the beginning. Because the region was flanked by vast mountains on both sides, and the terrain in the middle was low-lying along Sin Fan Avenue, the massive flood followed the laws of nature and continuously poured onto the low-lying road. The raging flood turned the road into a marshland, where numerous trucks and armored vehicles were entrapped with nowhere to go, leaving these steel beasts to be abandoned by their soldiers. The infantry were even worse off. Japanese and Chan country soldiers were shouting at each other as the water reached their chests in panic, fleeing towards the slopes and forests on either side. Japanese soldiers who managed to escape to higher ground in the forest had barely caught their breath before they were ambushed by steel camp soldiers and super soldiers, who had been waiting there for a long time and launched a deadly assault on these enemy troops. Bang! Bang! Bang! Bang! Bang! Miao Luin, the commander of the steel camp, led from the front with a 14.5 mm anti-aircraft machine gun, charging first into the mixed forces of Japanese and Chan soldiers. One by one, Japanese soldiers' bodies were torn apart by bullets. Their screams and moans were incessant. Behind the steel camp genetic warriors were the first-class super soldiers, with the second-class and third-class super soldiers at the rear providing cover. Although the Jekka Group soldiers were vastly outnumbered by the enemy's forces, which numbered in the hundreds of thousands, their impact and lethality were unmatched, especially after the enemy lost many armored units and fire support vehicles, making these genetic warriors and super soldiers even more rampant. You shorties of Sakura Valley, eat my bullets. Miao Luin deeply despised these Japanese soldiers who provoked Jekka Group, continuously firing bullets that cut individual Japanese soldiers in half at the waist. It's the steel camp guys. Bring up the heavy weapons. Japanese soldiers recognized the latest iconic model of biological armor from the steel camp at a glance. When the close combat ensued, various rocket launchers and single anti-tank missiles were fired. Miao Luin kept dodging. The biological radar inherited from the purple light bat allowed him to move like fish in water on the battlefield. As he dodged, his returning fire was sharp, leaving the Japanese soldiers in front of him in a river of blood. More steel camp soldiers grouped in teams of 3, coordinating with each other to strike. The entire steel camp was like a series of sharp arrows, piercing into the midst of the Japanese and Chan country soldiers. Following closely were the first-class super soldiers, while the second-class and third-class super soldiers provided cover. Additionally, the 2 mountain brigades on the periphery, consisting of over 9,000 men, pressed in from all directions, helping to relieve the pressure on the steel camp and super soldiers. Not only on the ground, but the sky was also erupting in intense combat at this time. Su Jie used the storage bag to secretly deploy an air defense missile base here. The radar turned on, and air defense missiles were continuously fired, locking onto and chasing the Japanese warplanes that came to support from the Sky Dome. Additionally, Jekka Group had purchased dozens of fighter jets from Maubert, and the pilots trained by Maubert country also flew to the airspace over the Ruakai Mountains to engage in intense aerial combat with the aircraft of the Japanese and Chan country governments. Various air-to-air missiles and decoys flew chaotically, with aircraft being hit from time to time and exploding in the air, not even giving the pilots a chance to parachute. It could be said that for this battle, Jekka Group had deployed many of their trump cards, striving to contain Japan's air superiority and keep them distracted, buying time for their ground troops to secure victory. Boom! In a deafening roar, a heavy aerial bomb landed 50 meters away from Miao Luan. Although Miao Luan tried his best to dodge, he couldn't completely escape the explosion radius. This wasn't a deliberate bombing on him by an aircraft. Rather, the intense air combat overhead had pilots jettisoning bombs from their laden bays to reduce weight and improve maneuverability, and coincidentally, one landed near Miao Luan. The blast and shockwave from the explosion flung Miao Luan, his biological armor tattered and no longer usable. Is that steel camp guy dead? Haha! With the aerial bomb so close, he must have been blown up by it. On board! I want to chop off his head and keep it as a trophy. Seeing this, the nearby Japanese soldiers, originally terrified by Miao Luan, suddenly became spirited, with some of them running up to decapitate Miao Luan. Click! But just then, the presumed dead Miao Luan on the ground suddenly moved. The tattered biological armor was torn open, and a figure, no, more accurately a devilish presence, rose to its feet. Miao Luan's body secreted layers of a peculiar gelatinous substance which, upon solidifying, turned into an insect-like chitin exoskeleton. His leg muscles stretched like steel cables wrapped around, filled with unparalleled explosive power. On his forehead, two black long spear-like horns slanted fiercely into the sky. At this moment, Miao Luan had fully unleashed his genetic warrior's true form, barely resembling a human, and more like a hellish devil from the abyss, with an exoskeleton covering his body, horns towering above, reaching a height of approximately 2.23 meters and weighing hundreds of kilograms, his eyes bloodthirsty and cruel. The Japanese soldier who stepped forward wanting to decapitate him, upon seeing Miao Luan's form, was so terrified that he couldn't move at all. Thinking of decapitating me? With just you? Miao Luan looked on coldly, his hand moving faster than his voice. His left hand flashed, grabbing the Japanese soldier's neck, and as he exerted force with his palm, a horrifying scene unfolded. The flesh and bones of the Japanese soldier's neck squished like mud through the gaps between Miao Luan's large fingers, a living human head being gruesomely plucked off. Seeing this scene, every Japanese soldier was stunned, wide-eyed and speechless. Not only did Miao Luan appear completely unhuman, but his abilities were nothing like a human's either. Now it's your turn. Miao Luan cracked his neck, making a crisp sound, and the next moment, he burst out at an ultra-high speed, running at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour. In the past, because of the weight of the biological armor and carrying a lot of ammunition, his speed was actually restricted. Now, free from the constraints of the biological armor, he could run at full speed. A speed of 180 kilometers per hour, almost covering 50 meters in just 1 second. Many Japanese soldiers couldn't even react in time as Miao Luan appeared right in front of them. Snap! Miao Luan threw a punch, instantly bursting the head of a Japanese soldier. His right leg kicked out, sending another Japanese soldier flying over 20 meters, the body tumbling in the air, landing almost completely fractured and with crushed organs, as if struck by a high-speed car. Actually, this was almost accurate, as Miao Luan's strength allowed him to lift 2 tons with both arms, and with his speed, simple punches and kicks were as devastating as a car crash. After killing several people in succession, the bullets from the Japanese soldiers finally hit Miao Luan. However, every bullet was deflected by the outer chitin armor, which could resist the barrage of a heavy machine gun. Strength, speed, defense. Miao Luan lacked nothing, and with his biological radar senses, even in a place teeming with warriors like the Steel Camp, Miao Luan's combat power was number 1. Monster! This is a monster! Seeing that bullets couldn't kill Miao Luan, the nearby Japanese soldiers grew even more terrified. To them, the biological armor could be understood as a single soldier mecha. But Miao Luan's appearance and the display of such terrifying combat power greatly shocked and frightened them, far exceeding the impact of the biological armor. Monster, huh? I like that name. Miao Luan grinned ferociously, charged to a heavy machine gun emplacement, crushing the crew inside, and taking the heavy machine gun himself with the ammo chain draped over him. running at a speed over 150 kilometers per hour, while firing at every Japanese soldier who appeared in his sight. This mode of slaughter was much faster than just using fists and melee weapons. None of the soldiers could hide or outrun Miao Luan's high speed. And heavier weapons were even less likely to hit the high-speed agile Miao Luan. Ordinary firearm bullets were simply ignored by him, and the battle turned into a one-sided massacre. In less than 5 minutes, the soldiers from Sakura Valley were completely routed by Miao Luan, all crying and running away, fleeing from this human-shaped demon. This slaughter and terrifying appearance had such an impact that the Japanese soldiers simply couldn't withstand it, throwing caution to the wind to escape from Miao Luan's sight. The intensity of the battle was so fierce that many of the biological armors of the steel camp were damaged, revealing their full forms. A genetic warrior, with his hands shaped like the blades of a mantis and legs moving as fast as the wind, streaked past, slicing Japanese soldiers and Chan country soldiers in half at the waist with ease, as if cutting through vegetables. "Invaders, let's see whether my blades are faster, or your bullets are," he taunted. The genetic warrior laughed manically as his hand blades, sharp as lasers, cut cleanly through both flesh and firearm as he swept by, leaving smooth, even cuts. Many Japanese soldiers were sliced in half at the torso, and it wasn't until a few seconds later that a line of blood burst forth. The top and bottom halves of their bodies separated, and screams shook the earth and sky. Thump, thump, thump. Japanese soldiers incessantly fired their bullets, rocket launchers, and grenade launchers, with machine guns spraying ceaselessly. Though this genetic warrior wore a high-quality Tianyuan protective suit, it was not enough to defend against machine gun bullets. Not every genetic warrior had inherited the kind of tough exoskeleton like Miao Luan's. Fortunately, he was not fighting alone. Precise bullets shot from afar, burrowing into the foreheads of machine gunners, their brains spurting out as their bodies swayed and then collapsed onto their weapons. "Mr. Xiaolin," the assistant gunner, in a flash of rage upon seeing his comrade, pushed the lifeless body aside and took hold of the rear grip of the machine gun. However, just 3 seconds after the muzzle began to fire, another bullet entered his skull, following in his comrade's footsteps. In the distance, a genetic warrior's body became as flexible as a mollusk, his 10 fingers elongating like the nimble tentacles of an octopus, each holding different firearms including rifles, sniper rifles, and machine guns, capable of shooting in a full 360-degree range without a blind spot. TSK, too many people, can't kill them all," he said. But the speed of his killing did not slow down as he truly managed to fire wherever he pointed. Unlike ordinary humans, his eyes, like those of a chameleon, afforded him 360-degree vision, and he could also watch multiple different objects at the same time. With the aerial eye worms providing surveillance from above, it was difficult for enemies to reveal themselves without getting instantly shot down by him. Many Japanese soldiers, armed with rocket launchers, anti-tank missiles, anti-material sniper rifles, and machine guns, barely aimed their weapons and hadn't yet pulled their triggers when a bullet pierced through their sockets. In this genetic warrior's combat zone, it was incredibly safe, effectively protecting the advance and combat operations of his comrades. Boom! Bang! A few mortar shells came crashing down, forcing the genetic warrior to retreat slightly. After the eyeworms located the enemy mortar positions, which were beyond his shooting range, he indeed called for assistance. "Giant Bear, take out the enemy at 11 o'clock, coordinates." Several kilometers away, a genetic warrior crouched on the ground, his skin sprouting black bristles, his mouth filled with sharp canine teeth, and limbs equipped with sharp claws, his size larger than the largest carnivore on land, the polar bear, and he easily tore through human flesh, biting off heads and flipping armored vehicles. Upon hearing his comrade's request for support, he detached the 120mm mortar from his back and swiftly commenced rapid firing. As a dozen or so shells fell, the Japanese mortar positions were instantly silenced, with gunners cut down by shrapnel and the shockwave, cries of agony filling the air. In the vast rear of the Japanese soldiers, a genetic warrior, blending into the shade of the trees, was constantly camouflaging himself according to the surrounding environment. On the tense battlefield, many enemy soldiers passed by him, yet none could detect his presence. Minutes later, he finally found his target, a gathering place of high-ranking officers. Click! The genetic warrior charged swiftly, his firearms spraying bullets, and the unsuspecting guards and officers were successively shot down. Without the command of the high-ranking officers, the Japanese and Chan country armies became increasingly disorganized. Hundreds of genetic warriors fought fiercely, displaying a vast array of abilities depending on the genes they fused, each revealing strange and diverse powers. At first glance, one might think they had entered a playground of monstrous creatures, with non-human horrors slaughtering humans everywhere. And the Japanese and Chan country soldiers, whether psychologically or physically, were enduring the non-human brutality and terror of the genetic warriors, as their morale plummeted ever lower. "My dear, it's your turn," Sujie said, observing the events on the battlefield and suddenly speaking to the air. Behind Sujie, a swath of red quietly dissipated. To reduce genetic warrior and super soldier casualties and conclude the battle quickly, Sujie chose to utilize fierce ghosts, whose extraordinary methods were not easily detectable by satellites above. Han Ruyan stood on the branch of a tree, her red wedding dress fluttering gently in the breeze. The cruel slaughter of the battlefield generated a considerable amount of fear energy. This energy, like the vortex of a funnel, continually streamed into Han Ruyan. The battlefield environment pleased Han Ruyan, who showed a faint, albeit cold, smile on her beautiful face. Raising her right hand, Han Ruyan slowly exhaled 2 words, "Go ahead." The heavenly ghost map unfolded, and a horde of ghostly creatures with strong hiding abilities howled as they burst forth. Nakajima Shokichi drove a tracked armored vehicle, and was lucky enough to cross the wetlands of Sinfan Avenue and climb up the mountain. Although the mountainous and forested terrain caused the armored vehicle to become immobilized, its weapon systems were still functioning properly. As the vehicle commander, Nakajima Shokichi continued to direct, having his crew operate the 30mm machine gun to strafe the soldiers of Jekka Group, providing fire support for their own troops. Kill them fiercely. Wipe out all these Jekka Group bastards. Nakajima Shokichi's eyes were bloodshot. His best friend had died at the hands of a genetic warrior, and now he hated the entire Jekka Group to the bone. Nakajima Shokichi kept shouting, constantly checking the outside through his periscope. Suddenly, the tracked armored vehicle stopped firing. The 30mm machine gun no longer discharged deadly bullets. "Tanabe Takagami, what are you doing? Fire! Fire now!" Nakajima Shokichi began cursing as he turned to look at the vehicle's driver and gunner. But to his amazement, the 2 men were sitting still, doing nothing. Just as Nakajima Shokichi felt something strange and approached to check, both men suddenly turned their heads in unison. Yet now, their eyes were vacant of life, and their skin as pale as paper. "Hey! What the hell are you doing? Hurry up and—" Nakajima Shokichi was in mid-curse when he suddenly felt a chill because the angle at which the 2 men had turned their necks was so extreme, well over 180 degrees, which would have snapped a normal person's neck. Nakajima Shokichi shuddered, finally realizing that something was very wrong. Before Nakajima Shokichi could react further, his 2 comrades suddenly lunged forward, grabbing his shoulders. "Have you gone mad? Do you even want to serve in the military anymore?" Nakajima Shokichi yelled, but what responded to him was their weird smiles, which didn't look like those of living people, but more like a dead person smiling. Click! Nakajima Shokichi found that his limbs were starting to act on their own, and through the glass of the observation mirror, he saw a woman in the reflection staring at him. "It's haunted." The thought flashed through his mind as his body curled up, slowly catching fire, flickering with blue ghost flames. In the midst of the flames, Han Ruyan's graceful figure stepped out from the fire, appearing inside the armored vehicle, while a woman also floated out of the observation mirror, Mirror Girl, the one who had just killed someone. So these are the weapons of humans in this pocket world, indeed peculiar. Han Ruyan curled her fingers, and the In-Chi turned into invisible ropes, taking direct control of the armored vehicle's weaponry. Once again, tongues of flame burst from the armored vehicle, But this time the target wasn't the Jeka Group soldiers, but the Japanese and Chan country soldiers instead. Boom! Boom! Boom! Boom! Boom! The 30mm machine gun fired continually, causing the bodies of the Japanese soldiers to explode. Taken completely by surprise, they had no thought to evade their own vehicle's assault. In an instant, the surroundings turned into a death zone with body parts shattered by the 30mm rounds flying everywhere. Damn it! We're on the same side. You're hitting the wrong people. Damn! Have they been turned traitor or bought off? Don't let him keep killing. Bring the rocket launcher here. You are committing treason. Kill these traitors. By the time the Japanese soldiers realized what was happening, over 100 had been killed. Someone brought a rocket launcher, and a rocket blasted into the armored vehicle, detonating the ammunition inside. Flames erupted from all sides, and the armored vehicle was finally silenced. However, such incidents were not isolated. At a rear artillery position, submerged under a flood, several self-propelled howitzers were firing continuously. The 50-kilogram 155mm artillery shells they launched could blast scores of meters in every direction, causing people and horses to tumble. But just as the Japanese artillery position was covering fire, several ghostly shadows drifted in. The cannons began to cease fire one after another because their operators had been deprived of their lives by various strange methods. Even with armor, including tanks, nothing could withstand the strange infiltrating killing of the fierce ghosts ranked 3rd and 4th grade. As the ghostly figures moved in, undetectable by ordinary people, the artillerymen and armored vehicles on the battlefield were dying mysteriously and fell silent. The last remaining heavy firepower of Japan and Chan country was suddenly thrown into an unsustainable situation. No eyewitnesses were left by the actions of the ghosts, and the chaotic battlefield became a hunting ground for the fierce ghosts, who freely toyed with the enemy soldiers. To ordinary people, any attack from a fierce ghost was extremely lethal without even trying too hard. Occasionally, someone would discover the existence of fierce ghosts, but even then, Han Ruyan's ability to block electronic signals meant no messages could be sent out, and the eyewitnesses would ultimately be killed to silence them. Fierce ghosts killed quickly, a fact that was still held back by the restrictions of their power on Blue Star. After all, there was no spiritual energy on Blue Star, so here the ghosts were like fish out of water, and using too much power meant having to recharge with spirit stones. For the sake of victory, the expenditure of corresponding spirit stones was inevitable to eradicate a large amount of heavy firepower. With the ghosts and genetic warriors striking, the battle was practically devoid of any suspense. One soldier after another sought to flee, but with Sin Fan Avenue transformed into a marshland, and the mountains above patrolled by super soldiers, genetic warriors, as well as nearly 10,000 elite mountain infantry, escape through the forest was impossible.
İyi sürenir.
I am from Chan country too. Chans don't fight Chans. Don't kill us, the Japanese government made us come to Chan country, we are victims too. In the end, as morale plummeted to rock bottom, Japanese soldiers and Chan country soldiers began to surrender en masse, raising their hands in the French military salute. Like a tumbling mountain, surrender spread like a virus, one after another becoming infected. The soldiers all had the same thought: why should they fight to the death when others could surrender and live, needlessly throwing away their lives? Because of this, many surrendered, and their actions of surrender were witnessed by other soldiers, shaking more soldiers' resolve, and the contagion spread, causing the entire situation to collapse. The fighting became sporadic, with the genetic warriors cleaning up the remnants of the hardliners. The rest of the Japanese soldiers and Chan country soldiers dropped their weapons, knelt with their hands on their heads, faces filled with despair and anxiety, awaiting the judgment of the Jeka Group. The great army of 150,000 suffered tens of thousands of casualties, some even drowned by the floodwaters. Could be said, had they chosen to fight to the end, to the last man, the outcome of the battle would still be uncertain. After all, the reality was that the Jeka Group was outnumbered, and the stamina of genetic warriors and super soldiers was not limitless. They too could be killed. But on the battlefield, there are no ifs. Clearly, the Japanese soldiers and Chan country soldiers did not possess the steel will to fight to the death, ultimately leading to their complete annihilation. General Su, we have won this battle. Miao Luan, covered in blood, walked back to Su Jie with an excited and thrilled smile. With just 10,000 men, relying mainly on hundreds of genetic warriors and thousands of super soldiers, they had managed to crush and eradicate this army of tens of thousands. This victory, if told, would likely be taken for a myth. Touching the 10,000-soul banner in his embrace, Su Jie contentedly said, "The way those Japanese soldiers look at you now clearly shows you have not disappointed my expectations." As they spoke, a stream of captives walked by with their hands tied behind their backs, heads hung low, being escorted. As they passed by, the fear in their eyes when they looked at Miao Luan and other genetic warriors was palpable. Many shook uncontrollably in their legs, retreating backward and avoiding the genetic warrior's gaze. Obviously, an indelible psychological shadow of the genetic warriors had been left in their minds. "Go take a good rest for a while. You'll probably become the center of public attention soon," Su Jie said, patting Miao Luan's shoulder. Already foreseeing tomorrow when news of the battle at the Ruakai Mountains broke, it would surely make the front page of international news.